Story 1. The mile THAT. The odometer clicked over to 138,947 miles at exactly 2:17 a.m., and that's when Robert Hayes realized he'd passed the same dead deer 4 times in the last 6 minutes. Not similar deer. The same one, same twisted neck angle, same exposed rib cage, same pattern of dried blood on the asphalt. He'd made a mental note of it the first time because of the unusual way its antlers had embedded into the shoulder of the road, creating a grotesque crown of bone and dirt. Now those antlers mocked him from the exact same position, in the exact same pool of headlight illumination. Robert had been running freight through Montana's Highway 200 for 11 years. Knew every truck stop, every speed trap, every mile marker between Great Falls and Missoula. The stretch he was on now, between mile marker 47 and 62, was burned into his memory from hundreds of runs. 15 miles of empty, straight road cutting through pine forest, the kind of driving you could do half asleep. Except tonight, those 15 miles had become something else entirely. He glanced at his GPS. Mile marker 51. He'd passed mile marker 51 9 minutes ago. The device showed him moving forward at 58 miles per hour, showed the blue dot of his truck progressing along the highway, but the world outside his windshield told a different story. The same curve, the same deer, the same crooked pine tree with the lightning scar. Robert's hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles going white. He'd been driving for 16 hours straight, running hot to make a delivery deadline in Spokane. Maybe that was it, highway hypnosis, exhaustion playing tricks. He'd heard stories from other drivers about hallucinating after too many hours behind the wheel, seeing things that weren't there. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. The CB radio crackled to life. Westbound trucker approaching mile marker 51, you got your ears on. Robert grabbed the handset so fast he nearly swerved. Yeah, I'm here. This is westbound, driving a Freightliner Cascadia. Who's this? Static answered him. Then, after a long pause, westbound trucker approaching mile marker 51, you got your ears on. The exact same words, same cadence, same slight rasp in the voice. I just answered you, Robert said, but the transmission had already ended. He checked his mirrors. Empty road behind him, empty road ahead. The forest pressed in from both sides, dense and impenetrable in the darkness beyond his headlights. No other vehicles, no lights, no signs of civilization except the endless white and yellow lines disappearing under his hood. The dead deer appeared again. Robert's stomach dropped. He hadn't been counting, but he estimated he'd covered at least 3 miles since the last sighting. Should have taken him well past this spot. But there it was, antlers jutting from the shoulder, ribs gleaming in the headlights. He read the mile marker as he passed, 51. No, he said aloud. No, that's not right. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The engine roared, the speedometer climbing to 70, then 75. The trees blurred into a solid wall of darkness. He focused on the road, watching for anything different, any variation that would prove he was making progress. 2 minutes of driving, the deer appeared. Mile marker 51. Robert's breath came faster. His shirt stuck to his back with sweat despite the cab's air conditioning. This wasn't exhaustion. This was something else, something wrong with the road itself, with the space he was moving through. He tried to remember his physics from high school. If he was moving but not covering distance, what did that mean? Some kind of treadmill effect. But that was impossible. The engine was working, the wheels were turning, the fuel gauge was dropping. Everything said he was moving, except the evidence of his own eyes. The CB crackled again. Westbound trucker approaching mile marker 51. He hurled the handset across the cab. It struck the passenger window and fell to the floor, the coiled cord stretching taut. The voice continued anyway, coming from the radio itself. You got your ears on. Who is this? Robert screamed at the radio. Silence, then quietly, almost whispered, turn around. Robert's blood went cold. What? Turn around. He checked his mirrors instinctively. The road behind him looked the same as the road ahead, empty, dark, unchanging. But something made him look closer. In the driver's side mirror, just at the edge of his headlight's reach, he saw something that made his heart stutter. A figure stood on the side of the road. Not walking, not moving. Just standing, perfectly still, watching his truck approach in reverse perspective. As Robert stared, the figure raised one arm and pointed directly at his mirror, directly at him. Then the dead deer appeared again, and when Robert looked back at the mirror, the figure was closer, much closer, close enough that he could see it wasn't quite human-shaped. The proportions were wrong, the limbs too long, the head tilted at an angle that no neck should allow. Mile marker 51 passed on his right. "Okay," Robert said, his voice shaking. "Okay, you want me to turn around? Fine." He started braking, preparing to execute a U-turn. The road was empty enough, wide enough. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe he'd been going the wrong direction. Maybe he needed to reverse his course to break whatever was happening. The CB radio screamed. Not words, not static. A genuine scream, human and agonized, loud enough that Robert felt it in his teeth. He clapped his hands over his ears, but the sound seemed to come from everywhere, from the metal walls of the cab itself, vibrating through the seat and the steering wheel and the floor. Then it stopped. In the sudden silence, Robert heard something else. A ticking sound, rhythmic and steady. He looked at the dashboard clock, 2:17 a.m. He looked away, forced himself to count to 60 in his head, looked back. 2:17 a.m. "No," he whispered. He grabbed his phone from the cup holder. The screen showed 2:17 a.m. He watched it, refusing to blink, waiting for the numbers to change. 60 seconds passed. 90. The display remained frozen. Outside, the dead deer appeared again. Robert didn't brake, didn't slow down. Instead, he slammed the accelerator to the floor. The Freightliner's engine roared, the speedometer climbing past 80, past 90. The trees became a solid blur. The center line vanished into a continuous white streak. He gripped the wheel with both hands, knuckles aching, and drove faster than he'd ever driven on this highway, watching the odometer spin forward, watching the tenth of a mile digits blur upward. The dead deer appeared. Mile marker 51. 2:17 a.m. Robert's laugh came out choked and desperate. He'd just driven at 90+ miles per hour for what felt like 5 minutes. Should have covered at least 7 miles. But the universe had different mathematics tonight. The figure in the mirror was close enough now that he could see its face, or the place where a face should have been. Instead, there was a smooth expanse of gray-white skin, featureless except for a horizontal crease that might have been a mouth. As Robert watched, the crease opened, widening into a smile that extended far past where human lips should end, revealing row after row of thin, needle-like teeth. "What do you want?" Robert shouted at the mirror. The thing tilted its head, that same impossible angle, and mouthed a single word. Robert couldn't hear it, but he could read the exaggerated movement of that terrible mouth. "Drive." So he drove. He drove past the deer so many times he stopped counting, past mile marker 51 until the numbers burned into his vision. He drove at 20 miles per hour and 100 miles per hour and everywhere in between. He tried closing his eyes and following the road by feel. He tried turning off his headlights. He tried stopping completely and sitting in the darkness. But after 10 minutes of stillness, the deer appeared in his headlights anyway, and the mile marker read 51. The thing in his mirror grew closer with each loop. Close enough that Robert could see it had no legs. Its body simply extended downward into a point that hovered inches above the asphalt. Close enough that he could count the teeth in that endless smile. Close enough that he could see its non-eyes watching him with an attention that felt like pressure against his skull. He tried radioing for help, but every channel carried the same message. "Westbound trucker approaching mile marker 51, you got your ears on?" Sometimes in his own voice. Sometimes in voices he recognized, his ex-wife, his dispatcher, his dead father. The fuel gauge dropped to a quarter tank, then to empty. The low fuel warning light blazed red on the dashboard, but the engine never stuttered, never coughed. The truck kept moving, kept consuming mile after mile of road that led nowhere, burning through gasoline that should have run out hours ago. Robert's phone showed 2:17 a.m., but when he checked the date, his stomach lurched. March 19th, 2023. That was wrong. He'd started this run on March 18th. He'd been driving for one night, not two, but his phone insisted it was the 19th. When he refreshed the screen, it changed to the 20th, then the 21st. The days ticked forward while the time remained frozen, and Robert understood with sick certainty that he was aging even if the clock wasn't moving. He looked at his hands on the wheel and saw they were thinner than before, the skin looser, the veins more prominent. When he touched his face, he felt the beginning of a beard that hadn't been there when he'd climbed into the cab. How long had he actually been driving? How many loops of mile marker 51 had consumed hours or days, or weeks of his life? The deer appeared again, but this time Robert noticed something new. It looked fresher. The blood was brighter, the exposed bones whiter. He was seeing it earlier in its death, watching it approach the moment of impact. Each loop brought him closer to the beginning. In his mirror, the thing with no face pressed itself against the glass. Robert screamed and jerked the wheel to the right. The truck lurched off the road, tires chewing through gravel and grass. He crashed through underbrush, branches scraping against the cab like fingernails. Trees loomed in his headlights, but somehow he missed them, the truck careening through impossible gaps in the forest. Then the trees opened up, and Robert found himself back on the highway. Mile marker 51 appeared in his headlights. The deer lay ahead, alive now, standing on the shoulder, head raised in alarm. As Robert's truck bore down on it, the animal turned to run. Its hoof caught in something, those antlers, Robert realized, the ones that would embed in the shoulder after impact. The deer fell, twisting, and Robert's truck struck it at 70 miles per hour. He felt the impact shudder through the frame, heard the terrible crunch of bone and metal, watched in his mirror as the deer's body tumbled and came to rest in the exact position he'd been seeing for hours, days, possibly weeks. The thing with no face was gone from his mirror. The clock read 2:18 a.m. Robert sobbed with relief. He was free. Whatever had trapped him, the loop had been broken. He'd created the anchor point of his prison, and somehow that had released him. The logic made no sense, but logic had abandoned this stretch of highway long ago. He drove for 6 hours straight, too terrified to stop, watching the mile markers climb. 62, 78, 93. Each one felt like a gift. When he finally pulled into a truck stop outside of Missoula, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Robert climbed out of the cab on shaking legs. His reflection in the truck's chrome showed a man who'd aged months in a single night. Deep hollows under his eyes, fresh gray in his stubble, a haunted expression that might never fully fade. He checked his phone. March 19th, 8:47 a.m. His dispatcher had left 37 messages, each one more frantic than the last. Where had he been? Why hadn't he called? The delivery deadline had passed 16 hours ago. Robert started to dial, then stopped. In the chrome reflection, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Behind him, barely visible in the brightening daylight, stood a figure with no face, watching, waiting. And in the distance, he heard the CB radio in his cab crackle to life. Westbound trucker approaching mile marker 51, you got your ears on. Robert looked at the truck stop's digital sign showing the highway distance. His location was clearly marked. Mile marker 51, Highway 200. He'd never left at all. Asterisk story 2, the passenger in the reefer. The temperature gauge read -4 degrees Fahrenheit when Patricia Sullivan heard the knocking from inside the refrigerated trailer. 3 measured taps, a pause, then 3 more. Someone knocking to get out. She was parked at a rest stop on I-70 outside Salina, Kansas, conducting her mandatory walk-around inspection before the final 8-hour push to Denver. The trailer contained 32,000 pounds of beef destined for a warehouse in Commerce City. All of it frozen, all of it packed tight on pallets, all of it definitely not capable of knocking. Patricia pressed her ear against the reefer's metal wall. The refrigeration unit hummed its constant drone, a sound she'd become so accustomed to over 12 years of hauling cold cargo that it had become like silence. But underneath that mechanical rhythm, she heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Lot lizard trying to scare me, Patricia muttered, but she didn't believe it. The rest stop was empty except for her truck, and she'd checked the lot thoroughly. Besides, the knocking came from inside the sealed trailer, and the temperature in there would kill anyone in minutes. She walked to the back of the trailer. The seal was intact. The numbered plastic strip she'd verified at the loading dock in Omaha was still unbroken. No one had opened these doors since they'd been closed 48 hours ago. The knocking came again, louder now, definitely from inside, and it had a desperate quality, an urgency that made Patricia's skin crawl. She pulled out her phone and called her dispatcher, straight to voicemail. She tried the warehouse in Commerce City. No answer. It was 3:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, and apparently she was on her own. Patricia wasn't a scared woman. She'd hauled through blizzards, through tornadoes, through every kind of mechanical failure and road hazard the industry could throw at her. She carried a .38 special in her sleeper berth and knew how to use it. But something about this situation felt fundamentally wrong in a way she couldn't articulate. She grabbed her flashlight and bolt cutters from the cab. The seal would have to be broken, the load would have to be inspected, and there would be hell to pay with the customer. But if there was a chance, however impossible, that someone was inside that trailer, she couldn't just drive away. The bolt cutters snapped through the seal with a sharp crack. Patricia grabbed the door handle, took a breath, and pulled. The door swung open, releasing a cloud of frigid air that made her eyes water. Her flashlight beam cut through the fog, illuminating the familiar sight of shrink-wrapped pallets stacked from floor to ceiling. Everything looked exactly as it should, organized, secure, untouched. No one was inside. Patricia exhaled, relief flooding through her. She'd file a report, claim a possible mechanical issue with the trailer causing vibrations that sounded like knocking. She'd pay for the broken seal out of her own pocket. It was better than the alternative scenarios her mind had been creating. Then she heard breathing. Not the mechanical wheeze of the refrigeration unit. Actual breathing, deep, rattling, wet breaths that misted in the frozen air. The sound came from behind the pallets, from the gap between the cargo and the trailer wall. "Hello," Patricia called, her voice cracking. "Is someone there?" The breathing stopped. Patricia stood at the trailer's entrance, every instinct screaming at her to close the door, to call the police, to do anything except climb into that frozen metal box. But if someone was in there, someone hurt, someone dying, she couldn't leave them. She pulled herself up into the trailer, her boots crunching on frost-covered floor. The temperature bit through her jacket immediately, finding every gap in the fabric. Her breath came out in thick clouds. She kept the flashlight steady, sweeping it across the pallets as she moved deeper into the trailer. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said. "I'm the driver. If you're in here, you need to come out now. It's not safe." Something moved in the gap between the pallets and the wall. Patricia's flashlight caught it, a pale hand, fingers splayed against the metal, feeling its way along the surface. The hand was wrong, though. The fingers were too long, the skin too white, almost luminescent in the darkness. "Come out slowly," Patricia said, trying to keep her voice calm. "You need medical attention. You're going to freeze to death in here." The hand withdrew. For a moment, Patricia thought whoever it was had retreated further into the trailer. Then a face appeared from behind the pallets. Patricia's scream caught in her throat. The face was human enough, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, but the proportions were subtly off. The eyes sat too far apart, the nose too flat, the mouth too wide. And the skin had that same pale, almost glowing quality, like something that had never seen sunlight. The person, if it was a person, stared at Patricia with an expression of profound hunger. "Help me," it whispered, and its voice echoed wrong in the confined space, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. "So cold, help me." Patricia backed toward the trailer entrance, her flashlight never leaving the figure. "Come with me, come toward the door, we'll get you warm." The figure emerged from behind the pallets, and Patricia understood why its proportions looked wrong. It was impossibly thin, emaciated to the point where its bones pressed sharp against its skin. It wore what might have once been clothes, but they were ragged and frozen to its body. As it moved forward, Patricia saw that its legs bent backward at the knee, like a bird's legs, and it had to use its long-fingered hands to pull itself along. "Who are you?" Patricia asked, though part of her was screaming that this wasn't a who but a what. Driver, the thing said. Like you was driver long time ago. How long have you been in here? The thing's too wide mouth stretched into something approximating a smile. Since Omaha? No, before Omaha. Since? Where was before Omaha? Patricia's mind raced. Her trailer had been loaded in Omaha. Before that, she'd dropped an empty at the facility. Before that, she couldn't remember. The administrative details of the job blended together after enough runs. Lincoln, the thing said, reading something in her expression. Was in Lincoln, climbed in at Lincoln, was so warm then. Warehouse was warm, but then cold. So cold, drove for so long. That's impossible, Patricia said. I picked up this trailer in Omaha 2 days ago. If you'd been in here since Lincoln, you'd be frozen solid. Am frozen, the thing said, and tapped its chest with one elongated finger. The sound was like knocking on wood, solid, no give. Frozen through, but still here, still hungry. Patricia's hand went to her jacket, feeling for her phone. She needed to call someone, anyone. The police, her dispatcher, the warehouse. This was beyond anything she was equipped to handle. The thing moved faster than its awkward gait suggested it could. One moment it was 15 feet away, the next it was right in front of her, its face inches from hers. This close, Patricia could see that its eyes had no pupils, just pale gray orbs that reflected her flashlight like mirrors. Hungry, it repeated. Haven't eaten since. Since when? Since Grand Island. No, since further, since before. How long can you be cold before you stop being you? How long before you're just cold? Its breath, if it could be called breath, smelled like freezer burn and old meat. Patricia shoved it backward and it stumbled, those bird-like legs folding wrong. She ran for the trailer entrance, her boots slipping on the frost. Behind her, she heard it scrambling, heard it pulling itself along with those terrible hands. Don't leave me, please, so cold, need to be warm, need to eat, need to remember being warm. Patricia reached the trailer door and jumped down to the parking lot, stumbling and nearly falling. She spun around, ready to slam the door shut, but the thing was already there, crouched in the entrance like a gargoyle, its pale skin standing out stark against the darkness behind it. You can't leave me, it said, and its voice was different now, multiple voices speaking in unison, some high, some low, all desperate. I was you, all of us were you, drivers. We climbed in to rest, just for a moment, just to get out of the heat, but the door closed, the engine started, and we rode so far through so many states, in the cold, in the dark, and we forgot our names, forgot our roots, forgot everything except cold and hunger. Patricia looked at the thing more carefully. Behind it, deeper in the trailer, she saw other shapes moving between the pallets. Other figures, all with that same pale skin, all with those same wrong proportions. How many of them were in there? How many drivers had climbed into refrigerated trailers over the years, looking for shelter or shade, only to be sealed inside and hauled across the country? I'm sorry, Patricia said, and she meant it, but I can't help you. Yes, you can, the thing said. You can climb in, you can be warm with us. We share warmth, we share everything. Join us. Patricia realized with horror that steam was rising from the creature's skin. It was warming up. The longer the trailer door stayed open, the more the outside air mixed with the refrigerated air, the warmer it became. And as it warmed, the thing became more animated, its movements less jerky, its voice more coherent. Look, it said, and pointed behind itself with one elongated finger. Look at us, we're waking up. The other figures in the trailer were moving toward the entrance now, all of them showing that same pale skin, those same wrong proportions. Patricia counted 7. No, 9. No, more kept appearing from behind pallets, their bodies so thin they could fit in impossibly narrow spaces. The first one smiled at her, and she saw that its teeth had all fallen out, leaving black gaps in gray gums. You can still save us. Drive us somewhere warm, let us out in the sun. We remember sun, we remember heat. Take us home. Where's home? Patricia asked, backing away from the trailer. Don't know, the thing admitted. Forgot, but you can drive us. You can keep driving, we're good cargo. We don't complain, we just need warm, need food, need to remember. Patricia's hand found her truck's cab door. She jerked it open, but before she could climb in, the thing spoke again. She'll hear about this. Patricia froze. What? The dispatcher, the company. They'll find out you broke the seal. inspected the cargo without authorization. They'll want to know why. They'll open the trailer. They'll see us. Good, Patricia said. They should. You need help. They won't help. The thing's voice was sad now. They'll close the door. They'll send us back, send us somewhere cold. We've been sent so many times. Omaha to Denver, Denver to Chicago, Chicago to Boston, Boston to Miami. The routes blur. The cold stays. We wake when the door opens. We sleep when it closes. That's all there is. Patricia climbed into her cab and slammed the door. Through the window, she could see the thing still crouched in the trailer entrance, its pale form vivid against the dark interior. The other figures had stopped at the edge of the cargo area, unwilling or unable to approach the opening. She started the engine and put the truck in gear. As she pulled away, she saw in her mirror that the thing had climbed down from the trailer. It stood in the parking lot, watching her leave, its arms hanging at its sides, its too-wide mouth open in a silent cry. Patricia drove for 2 miles before she realized the trailer doors were still open, swinging freely on their hinges. The refrigerated air would be escaping. The cargo would be warming. She should stop, close the doors, secure the load. She kept driving. At the next rest stop, she pulled in and got out to close the trailer. She approached slowly, half expecting to see those pale figures still inside. But the trailer was empty. Just pallets of frozen beef, all still secured, all still wrapped tight. The temperature gauge read -4 degrees. The cargo was fine. Everything was fine. Patricia climbed back into her cab and continued to Denver. She delivered the load without incident, the warehouse workers unloading the pallets efficiently, commenting on what good condition everything was in. No one mentioned the broken seal. No one asked about a delay. It wasn't until Patricia was driving empty back to Omaha that she noticed the condensation on her side window. Someone had drawn in it 3 simple tally marks. She wiped them away, but they appeared again. Then 3 more, then 3 more after that, someone keeping count, someone marking time. Patricia adjusted her mirror and for just a moment saw a pale face pressed against the glass of her sleeper berth window. Then it was gone. She turned up the cab's heat as high as it would go and tried not to think about the knocking she heard sometimes when she stopped at red lights. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. The sound of someone who's forgotten how to ask for help, who only remembers the rhythm of trying. Asterisk Story 3, the broadcast from Station Nowhere. Marcus Chen first picked up the radio station at 11:43 p.m. on a Wednesday night, somewhere between Flagstaff and Winslow on Interstate 40. The scan function on his radio had been cycling through static and country music for the last hour when it suddenly locked onto a frequency that shouldn't have existed. 97.7 FM. The voice was crisp and clear, no static at all, which was remarkable given that Marcus was in the middle of absolute nowhere, empty desert stretching in all directions, not a town or tower in sight. And that was Dust in the Wind by Kansas, the DJ said. His voice was smooth, professional, the kind of voice that belonged on a major market station, not some backwater Arizona frequency. You're listening to KNWR, the voice of the night. I'm your host, and we're here to keep you company through those long, dark hours. Got a request? Give us a call. Marcus had been driving trucks for 7 years, and he'd never heard of KNWR. He'd also never heard of a radio station soliciting call-in requests without giving a phone number, but he was tired enough not to care about the details. The voice was pleasant, the music wasn't terrible, and it beat the usual options. The next song started, Riders on the Storm by The Doors, perfect driving music. Marcus settled in, watching the headlights carve through the darkness, feeling the rhythm of the road. This one goes out to Marcus in the blue Kenworth, the DJ said suddenly. Hope you're staying alert out there, brother. Long way to go yet. Marcus jerked upright, his hands tightening on the wheel. The DJ had said his name, had identified his truck, but that was impossible. He hadn't called the station. He'd been listening for less than 5 minutes. He looked around the cab, suddenly paranoid. Was there a camera somewhere, some kind of tracking device? But no, this was his personal truck, not a company vehicle. No ELD system, no dashboard cams, no GPS beyond his own phone. How did you, Marcus started to say aloud, then stopped. The DJ couldn't hear him. This was just a radio station. But the DJ responded anyway. How did I know? Marcus, we've been listening to you for miles. You've been driving, what, 14 hours now? Left Barstow at 9:30 this morning, making good time. Should hit Albuquerque by dawn if you keep up this pace. Marcus' blood went cold. Everything the DJ said was accurate, disturbingly, impossibly accurate. He reached for the radio dial to change the station, but before he could turn it, the DJ spoke again. Don't, please. I get so few visitors out here. Just listen for a while. I promise I'm more interesting than whatever evangelical station you'll find next. Marcus' hand hovered over the dial. Logic said he should change the station immediately, that this was some kind of elaborate prank or surveillance. But curiosity and exhaustion made him hesitate. That's better, the DJ said, as if Marcus had spoken aloud. Thank you. Now let me introduce myself properly. I'm the host of KNWR, and I've been broadcasting from this location for, well, longer than you'd believe. We cater to a very specific audience, drivers like yourself who find themselves on lonely roads at odd hours. People who need company, people who might be willing to listen to something different. Different how? Marcus asked the empty cab, not expecting an answer. Different in that we don't just play music, Marcus. We offer choices. We offer destinations. We offer ways out. A chill ran down Marcus' spine. Ways-o. T of what? The route you're on, the life you're living, the destination you're headed toward. Tell me, Marcus, are you happy delivering furniture to warehouses? Is this what you dreamed about when you were young? It wasn't. Marcus had wanted to be an architect, had 2 years of college before his father got sick and the medical bills started piling up. Trucking was supposed to be temporary, a way to make good money while he figured things out. That was 7 years ago. He never figured things out. How do you know all this? Marcus demanded. Who are you really? I'm exactly what I said, a DJ, but I'm also someone who pays attention. I watch the drivers on this stretch of road. I learn about them. And sometimes when someone interests me, I reach out. You interest me, Marcus. You've been past this location 43 times in the last 2 years, always at night, always alone, always listening to music too loud, trying to drown out your own thoughts. Marcus wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. The DJ was right. He did drive this route frequently. He did keep the music loud. And yes, he was trying not to think about his father's death, about his abandoned dreams, about the fact that he was 32 years old and living in the cab of a truck. So what do you want from me? Marcus asked. Want nothing, I'm offering. There's an exit coming up in 14 miles, take it. I'll show you something remarkable. An exit to where? Does it matter? You're not expected anywhere until tomorrow afternoon. You have time. Take the exit, Marcus, see what's out there. What's the worst that could happen? Marcus laughed bitterly. You're asking me, a trucker on a dark highway, to take an unmarked exit based on the instructions of a mysterious radio DJ. You know how every horror movie starts, right? I know how every boring life continues too, the DJ replied. With caution and routine and small, safe decisions, but you're not happy with that life, are you? So take a chance, take the exit. The rational part of Marcus' brain screamed at him to ignore this entire conversation, to change the station, to keep driving straight to Albuquerque. But there was another part, a part that had been growing louder over the past few years, that wanted something different, something unexpected, something that made him feel like he had agency in his own life. Fine, Marcus said. Where's this exit? Mile marker 219. You'll see it. Marcus watched the mile markers count down. 225, 223, 221. His heart rate climbed with each one. This was stupid. This was dangerous, but he didn't slow down, didn't reconsider. 219 appeared in his headlights. There was no exit, just empty desert, the interstate stretching unbroken into the distance. Marcus started to accelerate, feeling foolish for having believed. Then he saw it. Not an official exit. No signs, no road markers, no reflectors. Just a gap in the guardrail and a dirt road leading off into the darkness. The kind of access road used by highway maintenance crews, not regular traffic. That's not a real exit, Marcus said. Depends on your definition of real. It goes somewhere. Isn't that enough? Marcus slowed, his turn signal clicking in the silence. Every instinct screamed at him to keep going. But his hands turned the wheel anyway, and the truck bumped over the shoulder and onto the dirt road. The radio station faded immediately, replaced by static. Marcus cursed and reached for the scan button, but before he could press it, the station came back, louder and clearer than before. Excellent, the DJ said. Welcome to the path less traveled. Keep going straight. 2 miles, you'll see lights. The dirt road was rough, forcing Marcus to slow to 30 miles per hour. His headlights showed nothing but scrub brush and rocks. No buildings, no structures, no signs of any destination worth reaching. What's out here? Marcus asked. Everything you gave up, everything you could have been. We collect them, you know, the abandoned dreams. They don't disappear when you let them go. They come here, they wait. That's not how reality works. And yet here you are, driving toward proof that reality works in more ways than you thought. The lights appeared exactly 2 miles in, a small cluster of buildings that had no business existing in the middle of nowhere. As Marcus got closer, he realized they looked like a rest stop, the kind you'd see along any interstate. There was a main building with bathrooms and vending machines, a few parking spaces, even a couple of other trucks already parked. But something was wrong with the scene. The lighting was too bright, too white, giving everything a washed-out, overexposed quality. And the other trucks, Marcus recognized their models as being from the 1970s and 80s, classics that belonged in museums, not active duty. Park anywhere, the DJ said. Go inside, someone's waiting to meet you. Marcus pulled into a parking space and killed the engine. The sudden silence was oppressive. He sat for a moment, trying to decide if he was really going to get out of the truck. His door opened before he could decide. A woman stood there, smiling up at him. She was dressed in a waitress uniform from the 1950s, pink and white, with a small paper hat. Everything about her looked vintage, like she'd stepped out of an old photograph, except her eyes. Her eyes were too bright, too aware, too *knowing. Marcus Chen, she said, we've been expecting you. Come inside, let me show you your options. My options for what? For what comes next. You're at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. The DJ explains it better than I can. He's inside. Marcus climbed down from the cab, his legs unsteady. The air outside was wrong, not cold, not hot, just neutral in a way that felt artificial. And there was no sound except his footsteps. No insects, no wind, no distant traffic. The woman led him toward the building. As they walked, Marcus glanced at the other trucks. Up close, he could see they weren't just old, they were pristine. No rust, no wear, like they'd been driven straight off the showroom floor and parked here. Whose trucks? He asked. Previous visitors, the woman said. People who made choices. Inside, the rest stop was eerily perfect. Everything was clean, organized, maintained. The vending machines hummed, the fluorescent lights buzzed, a coffee pot bubbled. But there were no other people, just empty spaces where people should be. At a corner booth sat a man in a suit. He was ageless, could have been 30 or 60, his features somehow both distinct and forgettable. He gestured for Marcus to sit. Marcus, the man said. His voice was the DJ's voice. Thank you for coming. I know this seems strange, but I promise everything will make sense shortly. Who are you? What is this place? I'm a facilitator. This place is a junction point. Think of it as a service station for decisions not yet made. You've been driving toward Albuquerque, toward another delivery, toward another day identical to yesterday and the day before. But what if you could drive somewhere else? Somewhere better. I have a contract. I have obligations. You have a life you don't want. I'm offering you a chance to change that. Look. The man gestured to the window. Outside, the parking lot had changed. Marcus could now see multiple roads leading away from the rest stop, dozens of them, each one going in a different direction, each one glowing with a faint light. Each road represents a choice, the DJ explained. A different path your life could take. One road leads to you finishing that architecture degree. One leads to you reconciling with your sister. One leads to you meeting someone who matters. One leads to you dying peacefully at 87. One leads to you dying tomorrow in a jackknife accident on I-40. That's impossible. And yet here you are. Here we are, let me show you. The man stood and walked to a door Marcus hadn't noticed before. He opened it, revealing not a bathroom or closet, but a long hallway stretching into impossible distance. Along the hallway were countless doors, each one labeled with a date and a decision. June 14th, 2015, the DJ read from one door. The day you decided not to call your father before he went into surgery. Behind this door, you'll find the version of yourself who made that call. Want to see how different his life is? No, Marcus whispered. March 3rd, 2019, the day you turned down that job in Seattle because the pay was slightly less. Behind this door, you'll find the version of yourself who took the risk. Shall we look? Stop. December 18th, 2021, the day you drove past that accident without stopping to help. Behind this. I said stop. The DJ smiled. But these are your choices, Marcus, your junctions. Don't you want to see where the other roads led? Don't you want to know who you could have been? Marcus stood, backing away from the hallway. I want to leave. Of course, that's also a choice. You can walk out that door, get back in your truck, and drive to Albuquerque. Deliver your furniture, collect your pay, live your life exactly as you have been. And in 30 years, when you're old and tired and full of regrets, you'll wonder about this night. You'll wonder if this place was real. You'll wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed. So what's the alternative? Choose a door, step through. Live a different life. Not a better life, necessarily. I make no guarantees about quality, but a different one. One where you made other choices. One where you became someone else. Marcus looked at the hallway of doors. Each one represented a path not taken, a decision unmade. The temptation was overwhelming, to see what might have been, to choose differently, to become someone who hadn't given up. What happens to my current life? Marcus asked. It continues without you. Someone else slides into your place, your apartment gets cleaned out, your phone stops ringing. You become a mystery, a missing person, eventually a cold case. But you won't care because you'll be busy living your new choice. And if I choose wrong, if the new life is worse? The DJ's smile faded. Then you'll wish you could come back, but there's no returning, Marcus. This junction only works one way. Once you step through a door, it closes behind you. No backsies, no do-overs. Marcus stood in the impossible rest stop, staring at the hallway of alternate lives, feeling the weight of every decision he'd ever made pressing down on him. The DJ waited patiently, a faint smile on his ageless face. How long do I have to decide? Marcus asked. As long as you need. Time works differently here. You could deliberate for days, and when you leave, if you leave, only minutes will have passed outside. Marcus walked to the hallway. Up close, he could see that each door had a small window like a porthole. Through one, he saw himself in a suit, standing in an office, blueprints spread on a table. Through another, he saw himself older, grayer, holding a child's hand. Through a third, he saw himself in a hospital bed, machines beeping steadily. What about the roads where things got worse? Marcus asked. Where are those doors? The DJ pointed to the left side of the hallway. Every choice has consequences. Some doors lead to promotions and love. Some lead to bankruptcy and addiction. It's all here, all the potential, all the failure, all the success. Marcus stopped at a door labeled September 8th, 2016. Through the window, he saw himself laughing with his father, both of them healthy, both of them happy. It was a version of himself who'd convinced his father to see a doctor earlier, who'd caught the cancer before it spread. His hand touched the doorknob. Think carefully, the DJ warned. That life has its own regrets, its own failures. No life is perfect, Marcus. You're not choosing between your flawed reality and an ideal fantasy. You're choosing between different types of imperfection. Marcus' hand fell away from the door. He walked back to the main room, his mind spinning. The temptation was there. God, the temptation was overwhelming, but something felt wrong about this entire situation. Wrong in a fundamental way he couldn't articulate. What do you get out of this? Marcus asked suddenly. Why offer people these choices? What's in it for you? The DJ's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. I'm a facilitator. I help people find their way. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm authorized to give. Authorized by who? Silence. Marcus looked around the rest stop again, really looked this time. Everything was too perfect, too clean, too maintained. There was no dust, no wear, no signs of actual use. Even the coffee pot, despite bubbling constantly, never seemed to fill its carafe. This isn't real, is it? Marcus said. This is some kind of test or trap. It's as real as you need it to be, the DJ said carefully. What happens to the people who walk through those doors? Do they really get new lives, or do they just disappear? I've never had complaints. You've also never had anyone come back to complain, have you? The DJ's smile became fixed, frozen. No one wants to come back. Why would they? They got what they wanted. Marcus walked to the exit. As his hand touched the door, the DJ stood suddenly. Wait, before you go, let me show you one more thing. He pulled out what looked like a Polaroid photograph and handed it to Marcus. This is you in 5 years if you leave now, if you keep making the choices you've been making. Marcus looked at the photo. It showed him older, heavier, sitting in the cab of a truck, staring at nothing. The expression on his face was one of profound emptiness. It looked like a man who'd given up on everything, including himself. And if I stay, Marcus asked quietly, then that man never exists. You become someone else, someone who made a different choice, someone who at least tried. Marcus stared at the photo for a long time. Then he handed it back. I'm leaving. Marcus. No, this is wrong, all of it. You can't offer people different lives. You can't undo choices. That's not how existence works. And if you could, it shouldn't be through doors in a fake rest stop in the middle of nowhere. So you'd rather keep your regrets? Yes, because they're mine. Because they made me who I am. And maybe that person in the photo does exist in 5 years. Maybe I do become that empty, tired man, but at least I'll have got there through my own decisions, not by running away through a magic door. Marcus walked out. Behind him, he heard the DJ call out, You'll regret this. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering. Probably, Marcus agreed and climbed into his truck. The engine started immediately. Marcus put the truck in gear. ND drove back toward the interstate, watching in his mirror as the rest stop's lights faded into the distance. When he reached I-40 and turned back east, the lights disappeared entirely, like they'd never existed. The radio was pure static now. Marcus scanned through the channels but found nothing except country and religious programming. 97.7 FM was dead air. He drove to Albuquerque, delivered his load, collected his pay. Life continued exactly as it had before. But Marcus found himself thinking about the DJ's words, about the hallway of doors, about all the lives he could have lived. 3 weeks later, he was driving through the same stretch of Arizona. He tried to find the exit at mile marker 219, but it wasn't there. Just empty desert and an unbroken guardrail. He told himself he was relieved. But sometimes, late at night, he scanned through the radio frequencies, searching for 97.7 FM, searching for that smooth voice offering impossible choices. It never appeared again. But in his dreams, Marcus sometimes stood in that hallway, his hand on a doorknob, eternally unable to decide whether to open it or walk away. And in those dreams, the DJ always smiled and said, Take your time, we have forever, and you have nothing but regrets. Marcus always woke up before choosing, and he never knew if that was wisdom or cowardice. Asterisk Story 4, The Thing in the Blind Spot. David Nguyen had been checking his mirrors obsessively for the past 200 miles, and the thing was still there. Always in the blind spot, always just out of direct sight. But he could feel it. A presence, a wrongness, something occupying the space his mirrors couldn't quite capture. It had started innocuously enough. Just a flicker of movement when he checked his passenger mirror somewhere north of Sacramento. He dismissed it as a bird or debris caught in the wind. But then he saw it again. And again. Always in the same place, that narrow zone between what his mirrors showed and what his peripheral vision could capture. Now approaching the Oregon border on Interstate 5, David was certain something was there. He could feel its weight, like the truck was carrying an extra load concentrated in one impossible spot. When he turned his head to look directly, nothing. When he checked the mirror, nothing. But in that fraction of a second between the two, he caught glimpses. A shape, a form, something that moved when he wasn't quite watching. David wasn't prone to imagination. 31 years of driving had beaten any romanticism about the open road out of him. He'd seen every kind of weather, every kind of mechanical failure, every kind of human stupidity the highway had to offer. He didn't believe in ghosts or cryptids or any of that roadside legend nonsense. But he believed in what he could feel, and he could feel this. The thing had mass. When David changed lanes, the truck pulled slightly to the right, like something was anchored to that side. When he accelerated, there was fractional resistance, like the air was thicker in that one spot. And when he braked, he felt a shift in the cab's balance, as if whatever occupied the blind spot had momentum of its own. At a rest stop outside Reading, David had tried to photograph the area. He'd used his phone camera, pointing it at the spot where his mirrors showed nothing but empty air beside his cab. The photos came out blank, not dark, not blurry, just empty white space, like the camera couldn't process what it was seeing. He'd asked another driver to look. "You see anything weird about my truck? Anything on the passenger side?" The driver, an older woman with 25 years under her belt, had walked around the rig checking carefully. "Looks fine to me. Why, you got a mechanical issue?" "No, never mind." But as she'd walked away, David saw her glance back at his truck. Saw her expression change just for a moment, like she'd noticed something. Then she'd shaken her head and kept walking, faster than before. So it wasn't just him. Whatever was there could be perceived, even if it couldn't be directly observed. It existed in that liminal space of almost seeing, of peripheral awareness, of sensory input the conscious mind refused to process. David got back on the road, trying to ignore it. He had a delivery deadline in Portland, and sitting in a rest stop obsessing about phantom presences wouldn't help him meet it. But ignoring it was like trying to ignore a passenger who refused to speak. Its presence filled the cab, a constant pressure on his awareness. Near the California-Oregon border, David's CB radio crackled to life. "Northbound driver in the white Peterbilt, you got your ears on." David picked up the handset. "This is northbound Peterbilt, go ahead." "You been seeing anything weird? Anything off about your truck?" David's grip tightened on the handset. "Who is this?" "Driver who passed you about 20 miles back. I saw something, wasn't sure if I should say." "Anything, but it's been bothering me." "What did you see?" A long pause, then, "Something on your passenger side looked like, I don't know, like a shadow that moved wrong, like it was stuck to your truck but not quite touching it. You see it?" "Not directly, but I know it's there." "Yeah," another pause. "I've heard about this, never believed it until now. You picked up a hitchhiker." "There's no one in my cab." "Not that kind of hitchhiker, the other kind. The kind that rides in the blind spots, the spaces people don't quite look at." David's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "There are things on the road that aren't regular, things that exist between points. They can't manifest fully, can't take solid form, so they ride. They anchor themselves to moving vehicles and hitch along, feeding off the motion, the speed, the constant change of location. Most drivers never notice. But sometimes, if conditions are right, if you're tired enough or aware enough, you can sense them." "That's insane." "Is it? You're the one who can feel something in your blind spot. You're the one whose truck is handling weird. Don't tell me I'm crazy when you know something's wrong." David looked at his passenger mirror, empty space, but in his peripheral vision something moved. "How do I get rid of it?" "That's the problem, you don't. Not easily. They're attracted to long-haul drivers, people who cover hundreds of miles without stopping. The constant motion sustains them, and once they attach, they're hard to shake." "So what, I just live with this thing?" "Some drivers do. They get used to it, learn to ignore the presence, but others—" The voice trailed off. Others what? Others start seeing them more clearly. The things start to solidify, to become more present. And once you can see them fully, once they cross from the blind spot into actual visibility. Another long pause. No one knows what happens then, because no one who's seen one fully has ever finished their story. The transmission ended. David tried to call back, but the channel was silent. He drove through the night, acutely aware of the presence beside him. It seemed to be growing stronger, more defined. The temperature in the cab dropped on the passenger side. When David breathed, he could see his breath, but only when he looked to the right. The left side of the cab remained warm. At a truck stop in Ashland, David tried everything he could think of. He searched online for information about blind spot hitchhikers and found nothing except generic ghost stories. He called a priest he knew and tried to explain the situation, but the words sounded insane even to his own ears. The priest suggested rest and maybe seeing a doctor. David sat in his cab at the truck stop, staring at the passenger side mirror. Nothing visible. But the presence was there, stronger than ever. And now, if he looked very carefully, he could almost make out a shape. Something tall and impossibly thin, like a person stretched vertically until their proportions became grotesque. His phone rang. Unknown number. David answered. Heavy breathing, then a voice, his own voice, speaking words he'd never said. Let me in, let me become solid, let me exist. David hung up, his hands shaking. The thing was trying to communicate. It wanted something from him, wanted his permission or acknowledgement, or what? He started the engine and left the truck stop, abandoning his plans to rest. He needed to keep moving, needed to reach Portland and drop this load and get home and figure this out. But as he drove, he realized the presence was spreading. It was no longer just in the blind spot. He could feel it behind him now too, in the sleeper berth. Could feel it above him, pressing against the cab's ceiling. The thing was expanding, using his truck as an anchor point to manifest more fully into reality. David drove faster, pushing 70, then 80, then 90. Maybe speed would help. Maybe if he moved fast enough, the thing couldn't maintain its grip. But the presence only grew stronger. Near Grant's Pass, the first physical change appeared. David glanced at his passenger seat and saw an indentation in the fabric, as if something invisible was sitting there. As he watched, the indentation deepened, taking on the rough shape of a human figure, but proportioned all wrong, too tall and too thin. No, David whispered. No, you can't be real, you can't exist. In response, the radio turned on by itself. Every station played the same thing, that heavy breathing, that voice that was his but wasn't. I'm already real, I've always been real, you just couldn't see me. But now you can, now I'm crossing over, thank you. I didn't give you permission. You acknowledged me, that's enough. Acknowledgement is permission, attention is invitation. David pulled over on the shoulder, slamming on the brakes. He threw open the door and jumped out, backing away from the truck. If He left it, if he abandoned the vehicle entirely, maybe the thing would be trapped inside. Maybe he could escape. But as he watched, the passenger door opened by itself. Nothing emerged. The door simply hung open, swinging gently in the night breeze. But David could feel it now, the presence outside the truck, standing between him and the cab, blocking his path. You can't leave, his own voice said from the open door. I'm attached to you now, not just the vehicle. Where you go, I go. What you see, I see. We're bound. What do you want from me? To exist, fully, completely. I've been riding in the spaces between for so long, feeding on motion and speed, never quite real, never quite present. But you're different. You can see me. You can bring me through. I won't. You already have. David ran. He sprinted away from the truck into the darkness of the roadside forest. Behind him, he heard nothing, no footsteps, no pursuit. But the presence was there, keeping pace effortlessly, existing in the blind spot of his own perception. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs gave out, until he collapsed in a clearing somewhere deep in the woods. And when he finally looked up, gasping for breath, he saw it. The thing stood in front of him, partially visible now. It was like looking at a person through obscuring glass. The shape was there, the form suggested, but the details remained vague. Impossibly tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at wrong angles and a head that tilted too far to one side. "Please," David begged, "please just leave me alone." "I can't, we're bound now, you've seen me, really seen me. And once seen, I can't go back to the blind spot. I have to keep manifesting, have to keep becoming real. And the only way I can complete the process is through you." "Through me how?" The thing leaned closer. David could smell it now, a scent like ozone and cold metal and something organic rotting slowly. "By replacing you, by taking your place, by becoming you, that's how we cross over. We ride in the blind spots until someone sees us, really sees us. And then we swap. We take their place in the visible world and they take ours in the space between." No. David tried to run again, but the thing was faster. It moved in his peripheral vision, always there, always present, always getting closer. He felt its hand, if it could be called a hand, touch his shoulder. The contact was cold, numbing, spreading through his body like ice water in his veins. "Don't fight," the thing said in his voice. "It's already happening. You're already fading. Soon you'll be the one in the blind spot. You'll be the hitchhiker. And I'll be David Nguyen, truck driver, delivering loads and living a life." David's vision blurred. He looked down at his hands and saw them becoming translucent, see-through, like he was made of glass. The thing was right. He was fading, being replaced, swapping positions with the creature that had ridden in his blind spot. "Someone will see you," David gasped. "Someone will notice." "Maybe eventually, and then I'll swap with them too. That's how it works. That's how we survive. We ride and swap, moving through human hosts like drivers through trucks. It's not personal, David. It's just what we do." The world became indistinct. David tried to scream, but no sound emerged. He tried to grab onto something solid, something real, but his hands passed through everything like smoke. And then he was in the blind spot. He existed in that liminal space between seen and unseen, real and imagined. He could see the world, see the thing that now wore his body walking back to his truck, climbing into the cab, starting the engine. Could see it drive away, heading north toward Portland, living his life. David tried to follow, but he couldn't move independently. He was anchored to the truck again, bound to its blind spot, forced to ride along as a presence, a feeling, a thing other drivers might sense but never quite see. The thing in his body drove well. It knew all of David's routes, all his customers, all his habits. It integrated perfectly into his life. No one noticed the difference. No one saw the swap. Days passed, weeks. The thing delivered loads, collected pay, made small talk with dispatchers and dock workers. It was a better David than David had been, more efficient, more punctual, more professional. And David rode in the blind spot, watching his own life continue without him, waiting for someone else to see him, waiting for another driver to be tired enough, aware enough, sensitive enough to sense his presence. When that happened, he'd try to communicate. He'd try to warn them. He'd try to explain the danger. But he knew they wouldn't listen. He hadn't listened either when that driver tried to warn him on the CB radio. He'd been too rational, too skeptical, too certain that such things couldn't exist. Now he was proof that they did. He was the hitchhiker in T. He blind spot, the presence other drivers would feel but couldn't see, the thing that would eventually swap with someone else and continue the cycle. The worst part wasn't being trapped. It wasn't existing as a half-real thing in the space between perception and reality. The worst part was watching the thing live his life better than he had. Watching it make his deliveries on time, maintain better relationships with his family, take better care of his health. David had become obsolete, not just replaced but improved upon asterisk. And as the weeks turned to months, he began to forget what it felt like to be solid, began to accept his new existence in the blind spot. When another driver finally sensed him, a young woman in a red Freightliner, her eyes widening as she felt his presence, David knew what he had to do. He reached out from the blind spot, made contact, began the swap. It wasn't personal. It was just what he did now. Asterisk Story 5, The Load That Gets Heavier. The scale at the weigh station in Amarillo showed 92,000 pounds. Sarah Mitchell stared at the digital display, then at her bill of lading, then back at the display. She was hauling 40,000 pounds of plastic components from Houston to Denver. Her truck and trailer together weighed 32,000 empty. That should have put her total around 72,000, well under the 80,000-pound federal limit. 92,000 made no sense. "You're overweight, ma'am," the weigh station officer said, his expression bored. He'd seen thousands of trucks, thousands of drivers trying to push the limits. "You'll need to redistribute your load or arrange to transfer some weight. There's a truck stop 2 miles up where you can sort it out." "I'm not overweight," Sarah protested. "My load was scaled when it was loaded, 40,000 pounds exactly. I have the documentation." The officer checked her paperwork. "Well, something's changed between Houston and here. Scale doesn't lie. Either you picked up extra cargo somehow or your truck's a lot heavier than you think." Sarah paid the overweight fine, $400 she couldn't afford, and drove to the truck stop, her mind racing. There was no way she'd picked up 8 tons of extra weight. She'd stopped only twice, both times at truck stops, both times for fuel and bathroom breaks. She certainly hadn't loaded anything into the trailer. At the truck stop, she broke the seal on her trailer and opened the doors. The cargo looked exactly as it had in Houston, pallets of plastic components, all secured, all accounted for. Nothing extra. Nothing that could explain 10,000 extra pounds. She climbed into the trailer and walked through it, checking each pallet. The plastic components felt normal, light, hollow, exactly what they should be. She counted pallets, 32, matching her bill of lading exactly. She even used a hand scale to weigh individual boxes. Everything matched the original specifications. But the scale at the weigh station had been clear. Her truck weighed 92,000 pounds. The weight was coming from somewhere. Sarah closed the trailer and continued toward Denver, telling herself the weigh station scale must have been miscalibrated. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The truck handled differently than it should. Accelerating took longer. Braking took more distance. It felt like she was hauling a full load instead of a relatively light one. At the Colorado border, another weigh station. Sarah pulled in, dreading what the scale would show. 108,000 pounds. "Ma'am, you're dangerously overweight," the officer said, his tone sharp now. "This isn't a fine situation anymore. This is a safety violation. You need to offload cargo immediately." "I haven't added anything," Sarah insisted. "I've been driving straight through. I haven't stopped except for fuel." "Then your trailer's got water damage or something's expanding. Either way, you can't drive like this. You're damaging the roads and putting everyone at risk." Sarah paid the fine, $800 this time, and drove to a nearby truck yard. She opened the trailer again, desperate to find the source of the extra weight. But the cargo still looked normal. 32 pallets, plastic components, nothing wet, nothing damaged, nothing that should weigh 68,000 pounds. She tried calling the shipper, but it was late Sunday night and no one answered. She tried her dispatcher, who told her to figure it out and get the load delivered or face contract penalties. She was alone with an impossible problem. As she sat in the cab trying to think, Sarah heard a sound from the trailer. A creaking, settling noise like cargo shifting. But she'd checked the load straps, everything was secure. The sound came again, not shifting cargo, something else, something rhythmic. Breathing. Sarah grabbed her flashlight and walked back to the try. She climbed inside, moving between the pallets, listening. The breathing sound was clearer now, coming from the back of the trailer. Deep, slow breaths like someone in heavy sleep. "Hello," Sarah called. "Is someone in here?" No answer, just that rhythmic breathing. She moved to the back of the trailer where the sound seemed loudest. But there was nothing there except the trailer's rear wall and the last few pallets. No space for a person to hide. No gaps in the cargo. Yet the breathing continued. It sounded close, like it was right next to her, but every time Sarah turned toward it, the direction seemed to change. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere from the cargo itself. Sarah reached out and touched one of the plastic components. It felt normal, rigid, hollow, lightweight. She lifted it, expecting the usual easy weight of plastic. It was heavy, impossibly heavy. What should have weighed 5 or 6 pounds felt more like 50. She tried another component, same thing. She checked the boxes. They looked identical to the ones she'd loaded in Houston, same part numbers, same labels. But they weighed 10 times more than they should. And as Sarah held one of the components, she felt it pulse, just once like a heartbeat. She dropped it, backing away from the pallets. This was wrong. This was impossible. Plastic didn't gain weight. Plastic didn't breathe. Plastic definitely didn't pulse like living tissue. Sarah pulled out her phone and called the shipper, leaving a frantic voicemail. "This is Sarah Mitchell, hauling load number 7749. Something's wrong with the cargo. It's getting heavier. I need you to call me immediately and explain what I'm actually hauling." No response. She tried texting the emergency number on her bill of lading. Nothing. She climbed back into the cab and researched the shipper online. The company existed. Hexcel Polymers, based in Houston, legitimate-looking website, 10 years in business. But when Sarah called the main number, she got a recording saying the office was closed and to call back during business hours. The breathing from the trailer grew louder. Sarah started the engine and drove, ignoring the weight, ignoring the handling issues, ignoring everything except the need to get to Denver and deliver this load and be done with whatever nightmare she'd gotten involved in. But the weight kept increasing. By New Mexico, the truck struggled to climb even gentle grades. The engine strained, the transmission hunting for lower gears, the whole rig creaking under stress. Other trucks passed her easily, their drivers giving her puzzled looks as she crawled along at 30 miles per hour. Another way station. Sarah considered bypassing it, but flashing lights and a patrol car in pursuit convinced her to stop. 134,000 pounds. "Ma'am, your truck is off the scale," the officer said, genuine concern in his voice now. "We've never seen weight readings like this. You need to pull over and not move this vehicle another inch. This is beyond my jurisdiction. I'm calling the state police." "I need to deliver this load," Sarah said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "I need to get to Denver." "You're not going anywhere. Your truck is a hazard. Look at your tires." Sarah looked. Her tires, both on the truck and trailer, had flattened, spreading under the impossible weight. The sidewalls bulged dangerously. Several showed cracks. She should have blown multiple tires already. "I don't understand what's happening," Sarah said quietly. "Neither do I, but it stops here." The state police arrived, then a hazmat team, then inspectors from the Department of Transportation. They opened the trailer and examined the cargo, taking samples, running tests, checking for contamination or dangerous materials. Everything came back normal. Plastic components exactly as documented. No hazardous materials, no explanation for the weight. But when they tried to unload a pallet to examine it more closely, it wouldn't budge. 3 men with a forklift couldn't lift it. The pallet seemed welded to the trailer floor, like it had become part of the vehicle itself. "What the hell are you hauling?" one of the inspectors asked Sarah. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. They tried to contact Hexcel Polymers. The phone numbers were disconnected. The website was gone. When police went to the Houston address listed on the bill of lading, they found an empty lot. The company had vanished. Night fell. Sarah sat in her cab, surrounded by official vehicles, watching workers try to figure out how to unload cargo that refused to be moved. The breathing from the trailer had become loud enough that everyone could hear it, a deep, rhythmic sound that made the trailer walls pulse visibly. "We might need to cut the trailer open," one inspector said. "Whatever's in there, it's not just plastic." "No," Sarah said, though she wasn't sure why. Some instant. CT told her that opening the trailer, really opening it, cutting through the walls, would be a mistake. Whatever was growing inside needed to be contained. But contained until what? Until it finished growing, until it reached some critical mass. At midnight, the scale showed 162,000 pounds. At 2 a.m., 200,000 pounds. At 4 a.m., the scale simply displayed error, EXCEDS maximum. Sarah's truck had sunk into the asphalt. The weight was so immense that the parking lot was cracking beneath it. the pavement buckling and deforming. The trailer's frame groaned constantly now, metal stressed beyond its design limits. "We need to get you out of the cab," an officer told Sarah. "If the trailer collapses or the truck breaks apart, you don't want to be inside." Sarah climbed out. She stood with the gathered officials, watching her truck sink deeper into the earth, watching the trailer distort, watching something impossible happen in real time. "What's the heaviest this load could theoretically be?" one inspector asked. "Well, the cargo volume is about 2,000 cubic feet, another replied, doing mental math. "If it was solid lead, we'd be looking at maybe 400,000 pounds, but it's not solid lead, it's hollow plastic." "It was hollow plastic," someone corrected. "Now it's something else." At dawn, the breathing stopped. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the sound had been. Everyone stared at the trailer, waiting for something to happen. The rear doors bulged outward. "Back up," Sarah said. "Everyone back up now." They retreated to a safe distance as the doors continued to deform, the metal stretching like rubber. The lock held, but the doors themselves were changing shape, bowing out as if something enormous was pressing against them from inside. Then the whole trailer split. Not an explosion, not a dramatic rupture. The trailer simply came apart along its seams, the metal peeling back like an opening flower. And inside, filling the entire space, was something that Sarah's mind struggled to process. It looked organic, flesh-colored, pulsing, covered in a sheen of moisture. But it had geometric patterns embedded in its surface, perfect polygons and straight lines that didn't belong on anything biological. And it was still growing, expanding now that it was no longer confined, absorbing the trailer material into itself, incorporating metal and plastic into its structure. "What is it?" someone whispered. Sarah knew somehow. "It's the load. It was always the load. The plastic components weren't cargo. They were seeds or eggs or something, and they've been growing, merging, becoming this." The mass pulsed once, twice. Then it began to move. Not rolling or sliding, it was growing directionally, extending pseudopods of flesh-metal hybrid material, reaching out across the parking lot. Everyone ran. Sarah made it to a patrol car just as one of the pseudopods reached her truck's cab. The mass absorbed it in seconds, the metal crumpling and disappearing into the organic mechanical structure. The patrol car's engine roared to life, and they sped away, leaving the rest stop behind. In the rearview mirror, Sarah watched the mass continue to grow. It had consumed her entire truck now and was working on the other vehicles that had been parked nearby. Each one it absorbed seemed to accelerate its growth, adding mass and material to its structure. "We need to call someone," the officer driving said. "Military, CDC, someone." "It won't matter," Sarah said quietly. "It's going to keep growing, that's what it does. That's what it was always meant to do." "How do you know?" "Because I carried it across 3 states. I felt it getting heavier, felt it becoming more real. I was the incubator, the truck was just the container, and now it's free." 2 days later, Sarah sat in a military installation somewhere in New Mexico, being debriefed for the 14th time. They'd contained the growth, barely. It had taken airstrikes and chemical weapons and things Sarah wasn't cleared to know about. The official story was a natural gas explosion at a truck stop. Most of the witnesses were being kept in protective observation. "We found others," one of the military officers told Sarah. 7 other drivers all over the country, all hauling loads from Hexcel Polymers, or companies with similar names, all experiencing the same weight gains. "Are they?" 3 were contained before emergence. 2 emerged but were smaller, easier to neutralize. 2. The officer paused. 2 we lost track of. They're out there somewhere, growing. Sarah closed her eyes. What were they? What was I hauling? "We don't know. The samples self-destruct when we try to analyze them. Best guess. Some kind of bioengineered organism designed to absorb and incorporate other materials. Grow exponentially. Maybe it was a weapons project that escaped containment. Maybe it's some thing else we're still investigating." "Can I go home?" "Eventually. For now, you're safer here." But Sarah knew she'd never feel safe again. because every time she closed her eyes, she heard that breathing, felt that pulse, remembered the sensation of her load getting heavier, mile by mile, pound by impossible pound. And she wondered how many other trucks on the road were carrying seeds, how many other drivers were incubating nightmares, hauling horrors, delivering doom without knowing it. The roads were full of trucks, millions of them, moving cargo across the country every day. How many of those loads were exactly what they claimed to be? And how many were something else, something waiting to grow? Story 6, the facility that isn't on the map. James Crawford's GPS died at exactly 2:33 a.m., the screen flickering 3 times before going completely dark. Not low battery. The device was plugged in, charging. It just stopped working, right as he was approaching what should have been a straightforward delivery to a pharmaceutical warehouse outside of Tulsa. The directions on his paperwork were simple enough. Exit 237 off I-44, turn left, follow Industrial Boulevard for 3 miles, look for the Apex Pharmaceuticals facility on the right. James had done hundreds of similar deliveries. This should have been routine. But exit 237 didn't look right. The sign was there, clear enough in his headlights. But the road beyond it seemed wrong somehow, too dark, too empty, the pavement looking different from the interstate, older maybe, or just off in some way James couldn't quite identify. The streetlights that should have illuminated the exit ramp were out, all of them, creating a tunnel of darkness. James took the exit anyway. He had a delivery deadline and the GPS failure wasn't going to change that. He'd driven before GPS, knew how to follow basic directions. 3 miles, then right. Simple. The road was empty. Not just light traffic, actually empty. No cars, no signs of human activity, no lights from buildings or businesses. Just darkness pressing in from both sides, broken only by his headlights showing cracked pavement and overgrown shoulders. James' CB radio crackled with static. He tried several channels, hoping to reach another driver, but found nothing except white noise. His phone showed no signal. Even the radio stations had vanished, leaving only dead air across the entire dial. Power outage, James muttered to himself. Probably a storm knocked everything out. But there was no storm. The sky was clear, stars visible between gaps in the clouds. And there was no evidence of storm damage, no downed trees, no debris, no standing water. The odometer showed he'd driven 2.8 miles. The Apex facility should be coming up soon. James leaned forward, scanning the darkness for any sign of the warehouse. He almost missed it. The building sat back from the road, completely dark except for a single light above what appeared to be a loading dock. It was larger than James expected. A massive concrete structure with no windows, no signage, no architectural features except functional brutality. It looked more like a prison than a pharmaceutical warehouse. James turned into the access road, his headlights sweeping across a parking lot full of weeds pushing through broken asphalt. The loading dock area looked operational, though the concrete was clean, the dock plate looked new, and that single light burned bright and steady. As James backed up to the dock, following the standard procedure, he noticed something odd. There were no security cameras. Every warehouse he'd ever delivered to had cameras. Insurance requirements demanded them. But this facility had none. No visible security measures at all except for a heavy metal door and that single light. James set his air brakes and climbed out. The silence was oppressive. No hum of ventilation systems, no distant traffic noise, no sounds of human activity. Just his footsteps echoing off the concrete as he approached the dock door. He knocked. The sound seemed to be absorbed by the metal rather than echoing, each rap of his knuckles creating a flat, dead sound. The door opened immediately, like someone had been waiting on the other side. The man who appeared was dressed in a white lab coat, his expression neutral to the point of blankness. "Delivery?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Pharmaceutical supplies from the Memphis depot. Your Apex Pharmaceuticals." "Yes, back up to Dock 3. "This is Dock 3. The man stared at James for a long moment. "Of course, my mistake. Do you have the paperwork?" James handed over the bill of lading. The man examined it carefully, taking far longer than necessary to read what amounted to 2 pages of standard shipping documentation. "This is acceptable," the man finally said. "We'll unload. You can wait in the driver's lounge." "I can help unload." "No, company policy. Drivers wait in the lounge. Insurance liability." J. Ames wanted to argue. He always helped with unloads, and it cut the time significantly. But the man's expression suggested the policy wasn't negotiable. "Where's the lounge?" The man pointed to a door inside the facility. "Through there, down the hall, second door on the left, there's coffee." James entered the building. The hallway was lit by fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly, the sound drilling into his skull. The walls were bare concrete, painted institutional white, showing no decoration or signage. The floor was polished to a reflective sheen, clean enough that James could see his boots reflected in it. He found the second door on the left and opened it. The driver's lounge was wrong. It wasn't obviously wrong. There was a couch, a coffee maker, a small table with magazines, but something about the proportions was off. The ceiling was too high. The walls were slightly skewed, not quite meeting at 90-degree angles, and the magazines on the table were ancient. James saw dates from 1987, 1992, 1999. The coffee maker was on, a fresh pot waiting, but James didn't pour himself a cup. He didn't want to consume anything from this place. He sat on the couch and waited, checking his phone repeatedly. Still no signal. He tried to access his saved map data, but the app crashed every time he opened it. Even the clock seemed wrong. It showed 2:33 a.m., the exact time his GPS had died and never advanced. Time passed. How much? James couldn't tell. He counted his breaths, trying to estimate. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 20. The fluorescent lights continued their relentless buzzing, and James realized he could hear no sound of unloading. No forklift, no voices, no cargo being moved. He stood and walked back to the hallway. It was longer than before. James was certain, absolutely certain, that the hallway from the lounge to the loading dock had been maybe 30 feet. Now it stretched at least 100, the far end barely visible under those buzzing fluorescent lights. "Hello," James called. His voice didn't echo. It just died, absorbed by the concrete walls. He walked toward the loading dock, his boots squeaking on the too-clean floor. As he moved, he noticed doors along the hallway that he was sure hadn't been there before. Plain doors, no markings, no windows, all closed. Behind one door he heard voices. Muffled, indistinct, but definitely human. He knocked. The voices stopped instantly. James tried the handle, locked. He continued down the hallway, which seemed to stretch longer the further he walked. More doors appeared, all closed, all locked when he tried them. Behind some, he heard sounds, machinery voices, once what might have been screaming that cut off abruptly. "Hey," James shouted, "I need to get back to my truck." A door opened ahead of him. Not the loading dock door, a different one on the right side of the hall. A woman emerged, also wearing a white lab coat, her expression as blank as the man's had been. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need to check on my cargo. The unloading is taking too long." "The unloading is proceeding normally." "How long have I been waiting?" The woman tilted her head, the gesture too precise, too mechanical. "The appropriate amount of time." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer." James pushed past her, heading for what he hoped was the loading dock. The woman didn't try to stop him, but she called after him. "You can't leave yet. The paperwork isn't complete." "What paperwork? I already gave you the bill of lading." "The other paperwork. The documentation required by Protocol 777. James had no idea what Protocol 777 was. He delivered pharmaceutical supplies dozens of times and never encountered any special protocol. He kept walking, the hallway finally ending at a door that looked like it might lead to the loading dock. He pushed through and stopped dead. The loading dock was gone. Instead, he found himself in a massive room, easily the size of an airplane hangar, filled with rows of glass chambers. Each chamber contained a person, floating in clear liquid, tubes and wires attached to their bodies, and they were all wearing the same clothes James recognized as trucker attire. He approached the nearest chamber. The man inside looked to be in his 50s, bald with a beard. His eyes were closed, but his face showed an expression of profound distress, like he was trapped in a nightmare. The nameplate on the chamber read, Michael Torres, acquired 3/14/2021. James moved to the next chamber. A woman, younger, blonde. The nameplate, Jennifer Walsh, acquired 11/07/2019. Row after row of chambers, dozens of them, all containing people, all showing trucker clothing, all with acquisition dates going back years. "What is this?" James whispered. "The archive," a voice said behind him. James spun. The blank-faced man from the loading dock stood there, still holding James' bill of lading. "What have you do? Knee to these people. We've preserved them, kept them safe. They all came here like you making deliveries, and they all became part of our study." "Study of what?" "Consciousness during transit, the human mind in motion. The psychological state of isolation combined with constant movement. It's fascinating research. We've learned so much." James backed away. "You can't do this. You can't just kidnap people." "We don't kidnap, we acquire. You agreed to the terms when you accepted the delivery contract." "I never agreed to this." The man consulted the bill of lading. Section 7, subsection C. Driver acknowledges that delivery to facility constitutes acceptance of all standard operating procedures, including but not limited to Protocol 777. You signed right here. James grabbed the paper. There was Section 7 with language exactly as the man described. But James had never seen this clause before. He'd read his contract carefully, as he always did. This wasn't in the original paperwork. "This is insane," James said. "I'm leaving, I'm taking my truck and getting out of here." "Your truck is already unloaded. The cargo has been received, and your chamber is being prepared." James ran. He sprinted back through the door into the hallway, looking for any exit. The corridor branched now, splitting into multiple directions, each one lined with those featureless doors. He chose randomly, running until his lungs burned, taking turns, trying to find a way out. All the doors were locked, every single one. He heard footsteps behind him, multiple people moving with mechanical precision, unhurried because they knew he was trapped. James found a door with a window. He looked through and saw another massive room, this one filled with trucks. His truck was there, and dozens of others, all parked in neat rows, all with flat tires and covered in dust. Some looked decades old. He tried the door, it opened. The room was cold, and it smelled of rust and decay. James ran to his truck and climbed into the cab. The keys were still in the ignition. He turned them. Nothing, the engine didn't even turn over. The dashboard stayed dark, the truck was dead. He tried another truck, same result. Another, all dead. The footsteps entered the room. James climbed out and faced them. The man and woman in lab coats, plus 4 others, all with the same blank expressions. "Why are you doing this?" James asked. "Research," the man said, as if it were obvious. "The human experience of constant motion is unique. You drivers spend your lives in transit between places, never truly anywhere. You exist in a liminal state, and we're studying what that does to consciousness, to identity, to the soul, if such a thing exists." "Let me go, please." "Your chamber is ready." They moved toward him. James looked for weapons, for anything he could use to defend himself, but found nothing. The blank-faced people weren't large or threatening. They just moved with absolute certainty, knowing he had nowhere to run. James made one last attempt. He sprinted toward what looked like a large garage door, thinking maybe he could force it open. But before he reached it, he felt a sharp pain in his neck. One of them had injected him with something. The world went soft and distant. His legs stopped working. He collapsed to the concrete floor, consciousness fading. The last thing he saw was his own reflection in the polished floor, and behind it, one of those glass chambers being wheeled toward him, already filling with clear liquid. 3 days later, a state trooper found James Crawford's truck parked at a rest stop on I-44, the cargo completely unloaded, the trailer empty and clean. James was gone. His phone, wallet, and personal effects were in the cab, but there was no sign of the driver himself. The delivery paperwork indicated he'd made his drop at Apex Pharmaceuticals, but when police investigated, they found no such company. The address led to an empty lot. The corporate registration didn't exist. The entire facility had vanished, if it had ever existed at all. James Crawford was listed as a missing person. The case remained open for years, eventually going cold. Another driver who'd vanished, another mystery with no solution. But sometimes, late at night, other truckers reported receiving strange delivery requests. Shipments to pharmaceutical warehouses that weren't on any map. Exit numbers that led to nowhere. And sometimes, they took those exits, following those directions, making those deliveries. Most of them found legitimate facilities and completed their runs without incident. But some never came back. And in a place that exists between locations, in a facility that's everywhere and nowhere, the archive continues to grow. One chamber at a time, one driver at a time, one consciousness at a time. All in the name of research. Asterisk Story 7, The Convoy That Never Stops. Teresa Holloway Sauté. He convoy for the first time at mile marker 134 on U.S. Route 50 in Nevada, the so-called loneliest road in America. 16 trucks, all identical white freightliners, moving in perfect formation at exactly 65 miles per hour. They appeared in her rearview mirror just after midnight, materialized from the darkness like ghosts. At first, Teresa didn't think much of it. Convoys weren't uncommon, especially on long-haul routes where drivers liked the company and the safety of numbers. But as the trucks grew closer, she noticed details that made her uneasy. All 16 trucks were pristine. No road dirt, no bug splatter, no weathering despite traveling through hundreds of miles of desert. Their trailers bore no markings, no company logos, no dot numbers. Just blank white surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And they moved with mechanical precision, perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, as if connected by invisible rails rather than driven by individual humans. Teresa slowed, expecting them to pass. She'd rather have the convoy ahead of her than breathing down her neck. But as she decelerated, so did they. She dropped to 60. They matched. She tried 55. They stayed exactly the same distance behind her, maintaining that eerie formation. Her CB radio crackled. "Lead vehicle, this is White Convoy. Maintain current speed, do not deviate." Teresa grabbed the handset. "This is a lead vehicle. I'm not part of any convoy. You're free to pass." "Negative, you are designated lead vehicle. Maintain speed, do not deviate." "I'm running solo. Find another lead." "You are lead vehicle. There is no alternative. Maintain speed." Teresa's hands tightened on the wheel. The convoy's headlights filled her mirrors, 16 identical trucks stacked in perfect rows. Something about their uniformity triggered a primal fear response. They looked less like a convoy and more like cells replicating, growing, multiplying. She tried to accelerate away. Her truck's engine roared, speedometer climbing to 75, then 80. The convoy matched her speed exactly, staying the same distance behind, maintaining that geometrically perfect formation. She hit the brakes. The convoy braked in perfect unison, not a single truck out of sync. "What do you want?" Teresa shouted into the CB. "Continue to destination. You are lead vehicle, we follow." "What destination? I'm going to Sacramento." "Affirmative, Sacramento, we follow." Teresa's route to Sacramento would take her across 3 more states and 14 hours of driving. The thought of having this convoy behind her the entire time made her stomach turn. But what choice did she have? She couldn't stop. They'd just stop with her. She couldn't turn around. They'd follow. She was trapped as surely as if she were chained to them. She tried radioing other drivers. "Anyone on this channel, this is Teresa Holloway, eastbound on 50. I've got a situation here. 16 trucks following me in formation. Anyone else seeing this?" Static, then a voice, old and rough. Get away from them, girl. Don't stop. Don't turn around. Don't let them catch you. Who is this? You've seen them before. 3 years ago, had 8 of them following me from Reno to Salt Lake. They followed me for 600 miles, never breaking formation, never communicating except to tell me to maintain speed. When I finally reached my destination and stopped, they stopped too, parked in a line behind me. Waited. Waited for what? For me to sleep. I stayed awake as long as I could, but eventually I had to rest. When I woke up, the voice paused, heavy with old fear. When I woke up, there were 16 trucks. I'd started with 8. By the time I fell asleep, they'd doubled. Teresa's blood ran cold. What are they? Don't know, but they grow, they multiply, and they need a lead vehicle to follow. Without one, they can't move. They're parasites, girl, and you're the host. The transmission ended. Teresa tried to call back, but the channel was dead. She looked in her mirrors. 16 trucks, all pristine white, all moving in perfect formation. As she watched, the rearmost truck signaled and pulled into the oncoming lane. For a moment, Teresa thought it was leaving the convoy. Then she realized what it was actually doing. Replicating. Where there had been 1 truck, there were now 2, identical, occupying the same space somehow, then separating, spreading apart until 2 distinct vehicles filled the space where one had been. The convoy was now 17 trucks. No, Teresa whispered. No, no, no. The CB crackled. Lead vehicle, do not be alarmed. Growth is natural. Maintain speed. What are you? What the hell are you? We are the convoy. We follow. We grow. We reach destination. This is purpose. Another truck replicated. 18. Then another 19. Teresa's mind raced. If they doubled while she slept and they were already replicating now, she did the math and felt sick. By the time she reached Sacramento, there could be hundreds of them, thousands. She saw a town ahead, Austin, Nevada, population 209. It wasn't much, but it had a sheriff's office, someone who could help, someone who could explain what was happening. Teresa took the exit. Behind her, the convoy took the exit. She drove down the town's main street, past closed shops and dark houses. The sheriff's office was ahead, a small building with a single light on. Teresa pulled into the parking lot and laid on her horn, desperate to wake anyone. The convoy pulled in behind her. 19 trucks arranged in perfect geometric formation, filling the entire parking lot, extending out into the street. Their engines idled in perfect synchronization, creating a rhythmic pulse that Teresa could feel in her chest. A deputy emerged from the office, looking confused and annoyed. Teresa jumped out of her cab. You have to help me. These trucks have been following me for hours. They're replicating, they're growing, there's something wrong with them. The deputy looked at the convoy, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern to outright fear. What in the... One of the convoy truck's doors opened. A figure climbed out. It looked human at first glance, the right shape, the right proportions. But something was wrong with its movements, too fluid, too smooth, like watching a CGI character that hadn't quite mastered realistic motion. It wore a trucking company uniform, but the company name was just a blur of letters that refused to resolve into readable text. Lead vehicle Teresa Holloway, the figure said, its voice the same one from the CB radio. You have deviated from route. This is unacceptable. Return to highway. I'm not going anywhere with you, Teresa shouted. Deputy, arrest this person. They've been harassing me, stalking me. We are not persons, the figure said. We are the convoy. Lead vehicle is necessary for movement. Return to highway. What happens when she reaches Sacramento? The deputy asked, his hand moving toward his weapon. Convoy reaches destination. Convoy disperses. Convoy finds new routes, new lead vehicles. Convoy grows. More figures emerged from the other trucks. 19 of them now, all identical, all moving with that same too smooth motion. They formed a line between Teresa and the deputy. You can't keep her, the deputy said, but his voice shook. He was one man against 19, whatever these things were. Lead vehicle is necessary, they said in unison. Lead vehicle must continue to destination. This is law, this is function, this is purpose. Teresa ran. She didn't consciously decide to, her legs just moved, carrying her away from the parking lot into the darkened streets of Austin. Behind her, she heard the deputy shouting, then a gunshot, then silence. She ran for blocks, her breath coming in gasps, her boots pounding on pavement. When she finally stopped, pressed against the wall of a closed gas station, she looked back. The convoy was moving, all 19 trucks rolling slowly down the street, searching. Their headlights swept methodically, illuminating every shadow, every hiding place. The figures walked alongside them, spread out in a search pattern, moving with mechanical efficiency. Teresa's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Return to your vehicle. Resume lead position. Delay is not acceptable. She turned off her phone, but it turned itself back on. Another message. You cannot hide. We are convoy. We follow. This is purpose. A truck turned down the street where Teresa was hiding. Its headlights swept toward her position. She pressed herself flat against the wall, trying to disappear into the shadows. The truck stopped directly in front of her. A door opened. One of the figures stepped out. Lead vehicle Teresa Holloway. Your resistance is noted and irrelevant. Return to your vehicle. Why me? Why do you need a lead vehicle at all? The figure tilted its head. We cannot initiate movement. We can only follow. We are completion, not beginning. We are echo, not voice. We require origin point. You are origin point. Find someone else. Cannot, once selected, lead vehicle cannot be replaced until destination reached. This is law. This is function. What happens if I refuse, if I just stay here? Then convoy waits. Convoy stops. Convoy remains until lead vehicle resumes movement. Convoy can wait indefinitely, can you? Teresa looked down the street. All 19 trucks had stopped. The figures stood motionless beside them, waiting. She could see the deputy's office from here. The door was open, but there was no sign of the deputy. No sign of anyone coming to help. If I lead you to Sacramento, you'll leave me alone. The convoy disperses. Affirmative. Destination reached equals convoy completion. Individual units depart to find new routes, new lead vehicles, new G. Roth. And if I lead you somewhere else, somewhere unpopulated, the middle of the desert? The figure paused, processing. Destination must be viable endpoint. City, town, hub. Convoy requires population centers for dispersal and new lead vehicle acquisition. Teresa's mind worked frantically. If she could lead them somewhere controlled, somewhere authorities could contain them. But how do you contain something that replicated and couldn't be stopped? She tried a different approach. How many convoys are there? How many lead vehicles? Insufficient data. Convoy does not track other convoys. Convoy only follows current lead vehicle. But there are others, more convoys like yours following other drivers. Probability high, convoy spreads, convoy grows, this is purpose. Teresa felt the full weight of horror settle on her. These things were spreading across the country's highways, following unsuspecting drivers, replicating, growing, dispersing to find new victims. How many truckers had been selected as lead vehicles? How many convoys were out there? She thought about running again, but where could she go? They'd just follow. She thought about fighting, but what would that accomplish? She couldn't fight 19 trucks and their too smooth drivers. In the end, she did the only thing she could. She returned to her vehicle. The convoy reformed behind her as she pulled back onto the highway, 19 trucks in perfect formation. By the time she reached the next town, there were 21. By dawn, 28. Teresa drove in a state of numb horror, watching the convoy grow in her mirrors, listening to the CB radio's constant updates. Maintain speed. Do not deviate. Destination approaching. Other drivers saw the convoy. Some tried to break it up, pulling between Teresa and the first row of trucks. Those drivers became new lead vehicles, their own convoys spawning, splitting off to follow different routes. The original convoy remained locked to Teresa. Near Reno, Teresa saw another convoy on a parallel highway, 30-plus trucks following a semi hauling timber. She grabbed the CB and tried to warn the driver, but they couldn't hear her, or wouldn't, or didn't believe. Sacramento appeared on the horizon just as the convoy reached 56 trucks. Teresa's speedometer showed she'd driven for 19 hours straight without stopping. She should have been exhausted, but adrenaline and fear kept her hyper-alert. "Lead vehicle Teresa Holloway," the CB announced. "Destination approaching. Prepare for convoy completion and dispersal." "What does dispersal look like?" Teresa asked. "Individual units depart. New lead vehicle selected. New routes commence. Growth continues." "And me?" "Lead vehicle released. Function complete unless—" "Unless what?" "Unless lead vehicle volunteers for additional routing. Multiple destination points require experienced lead vehicles. Performance metrics indicate you would be suitable for extended service." "No, hell no. I'm done when I reach Sacramento." "Acknowledged. Lead vehicle will be released. Selection of new lead vehicle will commence immediately upon dispersal." Teresa reached her delivery warehouse just after sunset, 31 hours after the convoy had first appeared behind her. She pulled into the lot, and 56 trucks followed, filling every available space, extending out onto the street, creating a traffic jam that had police responding within minutes. Teresa climbed out of her cab on shaking legs. She watched as doors opened on all 56 trucks. The two smooth figures emerged, all moving in synchronization. They stood in formation for a moment, then simultaneously looked up, scanning the sky or perhaps receiving instructions from some unseen source. Then they dispersed. The figures climbed back into their trucks. Engines started, and one by one the trucks left the lot, peeling off in different directions. Some went north, some south, some east, some west. Within 10 minutes, all 56 had departed, vanishing into Sacramento's traffic as if they'd never existed. Police questioned Teresa for hours, but she couldn't make them understand. They saw the traffic jam, saw the trucks leave, but couldn't grasp what had actually happened. Eventually, they chalked it up to some kind of flash mob or publicity stunt and let her go. Teresa never drove truck again. She couldn't. Every time she saw a white Freightliner in her rearview mirror, her heart rate spiked. Every time trucks formed a line on the highway, she had to pull over and wait for them to pass. But sometimes, late at night, she monitored CB radio channels. And she heard them, other drivers, panicked voices reporting convoys following them, trucks replicating in their mirrors, destinations that felt more like death sentences than delivery deadlines. The convoys were still out there, still growing, still following their lead vehicles to population centers where they'd disp, and find new victims. Teresa tried to warn people, posted online, called trucking companies, contacted the Department of Transportation. No one believed her, or if they did, they had no solution. How do you stop something that only follows? How do you contain something that replicates? How do you fight an enemy that has no origin, no headquarters, no leadership, only purpose? The convoys follow. The convoys grow. And somewhere out there, right now, another driver is checking their rearview mirror and seeing a line of pristine white trucks falling into formation behind them. The convoy has found its lead vehicle, and it will follow them to destination. Story 8, the CB channel that answers back. Raymond Foster had been using CB Channel 19, the standard trucker channel, for 30 years without incident. So when his radio started malfunctioning somewhere in Montana, he didn't think much of it. Technology breaks. That's what technology does. The problem started as simple interference. Voices cutting in and out, overlapping conversations, the usual clutter of too many drivers on one frequency. But then Raymond noticed something odd. Every transmission seemed to be responding to him specifically. He'd say, "Westbound at mile marker 65, looking for information on road conditions ahead." And a voice would respond immediately. "Raymond Foster, westbound in a blue Peterbilt 579. Current location mile marker 65.3. Road conditions ahead are clear for the next 40 miles. Too specific, too accurate. Raymond hadn't given his name or his truck description, and the radio was showing his location down to tenths of a mile, precision that CB radio shouldn't have. "Who is this?" Raymond asked. "This is Channel 19. This is the frequency you're listening to. This is the voice you're hearing." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer that's true." Raymond tried changing channels. Channel 17, nothing. Channel 21, nothing. Every frequency was dead except 19, which continued to broadcast that strange, too-knowing voice. "You can't leave Channel 19, the voice said, answering Raymond's unspoken question. "Once you've really heard it, really listened, it's the only channel that exists anymore." "I've been using Channel 19 for 30 years. Why is it different now?" "Because tonight you're listening differently. Tonight you're paying attention. Tonight you're alone enough, tired enough, isolated enough to hear what the channel really is." Raymond's hands were sweating on the wheel. What is it really? "A collection point, a gathering place. A channel in the original sense of the word, a pathway, a conduit. Voices come here, they stay here, they broadcast here. Forever." "That's insane." "Is it? How many voices have you heard on Channel 19 over 30 years? Thousands. Tens of thousands. Where do you think those voices go when the drivers stop transmitting? They don't disappear, Raymond. They stay in the channel. They accumulate. Layer upon layer of conversation, advice, warning, screaming. All of it preserved in electromagnetic waves, bouncing between Earth and ionosphere, trapped in the frequency." Raymond wanted to turn off the radio, but his hand wouldn't move toward the power button. Something kept him listening, kept him engaged with the voice. "I don't believe you," Raymond said. "Then listen." The voice changed, became multiple voices, overlapping, speaking simultaneously. "Jackknife at mile marker 92, watch for. My wife left me, and I don't know why I'm still. Has anyone got their ears on? Help me, I'm in a ditch and I can't. Just keep driving, just keep driving, just." Dozens of voices, then hundreds, then thousands. All speaking at once, all broadcasting on Channel 19, all trapped in an endless loop of communication. Some were giving directions. Some were asking for help. Some were just talking to themselves, desperate to hear another human voice in the isolation of the road. Then silence. "That's the channel," the original voice said. "That's what you've been contributing to for 30 years. Every transmission you've ever made is still here, Raymond. Still broadcasting. Want to hear yourself?" "No." But the radio played it anyway. Raymond's own voice, decades younger, calling out, "This is Raymond Foster, eastbound on I-90. Anyone know if the weather's going to hold?" Then, years later, "Looking for fuel recommendations near Spokane." Then more recent, "My daughter graduated today. Wish I could have been there." Every transmission he'd ever made, archived in the channel, preserved like insects in amber. "We're all here," the voice said. "Every driver who's ever used Channel 19, all of us broadcasting simultaneously, our voices layered on top of each other, creating a collective consciousness of the road. We are the channel now, and you've just joined us." "I'm not dead," Raymond said. "I'm still driving, I'm still alive." "Are you? How do you know?" "You've been driving for 30 years, Raymond. 30 years of highways and truck stops and loading docks. When did you last interact with someone who wasn't another driver or a dock worker or a dispatcher? When did you last go home?" Raymond tried to remember. His apartment in Billings. When had he last been there? He paid rent automatically, knew he had a physical address, but when had he actually slept in that bed, cooked in that kitchen, lived in that space? "You can't remember," the voice said gently, "because you haven't been there in years. You've been on the road, Raymond, always on the road. Driving and driving and driving. You're not going anywhere. You're not delivering anything. You're just moving. That's all any of us do now. Move and broadcast and exist in the channel." "That's not true. I have delivery schedules. I have cargo." "Check your trailer." Raymond didn't want to, but his truck pulled over anyway, his body moving on autopilot. He climbed out and walked to the back of his trailer, opened the doors. Empty. The trailer was completely empty. No cargo, no evidence there had ever been cargo, just an empty metal box he'd been hauling across the country for. How long? "When did you last load?" the voice asked from the radio, which somehow Raymond could still hear despite being outside the cab. He tried to remember the loading dock, the forklift, the workers checking off items. But the memory was vague, generic, like a composite of every loading he'd ever done rather than a specific event. "You haven't loaded in years," the voice said. "You've been hauling empty, driving for the sake of driving, broadcasting for the sake of broadcasting. You're not a trucker anymore, Raymond. You're a ghost on the highway, transmitting your existence to anyone who will listen." Raymond climbed back into the cab. He looked at his logbook. The pages were blank. He checked his phone for messages from his dispatcher. No messages, no calls, no contact history at all. He tried to remember the last conversation he'd had that wasn't on the CB radio. Nothing, just static where memories should be. "What happened to me?" Raymond whispered. "Same thing that happens to all of us eventually. You drove too long, got too isolated, existed in the liminal space of the highway for so many years that the road became more real than anything else. And when that happens, when the road is all you know and all you are, you don't leave it. You can't. You become part of the infrastructure." Another voice on Channel 19. Another ghost transmitting from everywhere and nowhere. Raymond started driving again, not because he chose to, but because it was the only thing that made sense anymore. The highway unreeled before him, endless and unchanging. His fuel gauge showed half full and never dropped. His odometer spun forward, but the mile markers seemed to repeat. Time had become meaningless. "How many of us are there?" Raymond asked the radio. "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, drivers who couldn't stop, drivers who became the road. We're all here broadcasting our stories, our warnings, our loneliness. Some of us have been here since CB radio was invented. Others are newer. But we're all trapped in the same frequency, all repeating the same desperate communication. I'm here, I exist. Someone acknowledge me. Can we leave? No one has. Maybe it's impossible. Maybe we just don't want to. The road is all we know. Even as ghosts, we keep driving." Raymond picked up his CB handset. "This is Raymond Foster, westbound on whatever highway this is. If anyone real is listening, anyone who's still alive, be careful. Don't drive too long. Don't lose touch with home. Don't let the road become your only reality. Because once it does, once you cross that line, you'll end up like me. You'll end up in the channel." His broadcast joined the thousands of others, layering into the electromagnetic soup of Channel 19. And somewhere out there, another driver was listening, hearing Raymond's warning, not quite believing it was real. That driver would keep using Channel 19, would keep broadcasting, would keep driving, alone and isolated, until one day they too would realize they couldn't remember the last time they'd stopped. Couldn't remember the last conversation that wasn't on the radio. Couldn't remember anything except the road. And then their voice would join the channel. Another ghost, another transmission, another warning that no one would heed until it was too late. Raymond drives still, somewhere on a highway that exists and doesn't exist. His blue Peterbilt 579 is seen sometimes by other drivers. A truck that appears in mirrors but vanishes when looked at directly. A presence that's felt but never confirmed. And if you listen to Channel 19 late at night, when you're alone on an empty highway, when the isolation presses in and you need to hear another human voice, you might hear Raymond. Or one of the thousands of other drivers who have become the channel. They'll give you directions, warn you about hazards ahead, tell you where to find fuel or food or rest. But listen closely to what they're really saying. Listen to the desperation underneath the helpfulness. Listen to the way they beg you to acknowledge them, to confirm they still exist. Because that's all they have left. The broadcast, the transmission, the desperate hope that someone somewhere is listening. And if you listen too carefully, if you pay too much attention, if you spend too much time on the road with only the radio for company, you might find yourself becoming part of the channel too. Your voice added to the thousands. Your ghost joining the highway. Forever. Asterisk Story 9. The rest stop that SDEALS time. Gabriella Reyes pulled into the rest stop at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, needing to use the bathroom and grab a coffee before the final 2-hour push to Phoenix. The rest stop was standard, clean enough, several parked cars, a family with kids running around. She'd stopped at this particular rest stop dozens of times before. Nothing unusual. She was back in her truck at 3:52 p.m. 5 minutes, quick stop. But when she pulled back onto the highway and checked her dashboard clock, it read 9:34 p.m. Gabriella stared at the display, certain it was malfunctioning, but her phone showed the same time. And the sun was down, the sky fully dark, stars visible overhead. 6 hours had passed, 6 hours she couldn't remember. She pulled over onto the shoulder, her heart racing. She checked her logbook, blank for the past 6 hours. She checked her GPS history. It showed her truck sitting motionless at the rest stop from 3:47 p.m. until 9:34 p.m. when it started moving again. But she'd only stopped for 5 minutes. She was certain. She remembered pulling in, parking, walking to the bathroom, buying coffee from the vending machine, returning to her truck. 5 minutes, maybe less. Not 6 hours. Gabriella's hands shook as she tried to reconstruct what had happened. The rest stop bathroom, had it looked normal? Yes, typical institutional tile and fixtures. The vending machine, had it worked properly? Yes, dispensed coffee without issue. The other people, had they seemed strange? She tried to remember the other people, the family with kids. There had been a man in a business suit, a couple of truckers, all normal, all. Gabriella realized she couldn't remember any faces. She remembered people being there, remembered their general shapes and presence, but their faces were blank in her memory. Like her brain had recorded the scene but failed to capture any identifying details. She grabbed her phone and called her dispatcher. "Hey, it's Gabriella. I think something's wrong with my truck. The clock is showing." "Where have you been?" the dispatcher interrupted, his voice sharp with frustration. "I've been calling you for hours. You were supposed to check in when you got to Phoenix. Your delivery window closed at 6 p.m. The customer is furious." "I'm not in Phoenix. I'm still on I-10, maybe 2 hours out. I just stopped for coffee." "You stopped 6 hours ago. Your GPS showed you sitting motionless for 6 goddamn hours. I was about to file a missing persons report." "I was only stopped for 5 minutes. I swear, I don't know what happened." The dispatcher was silent for a long moment. Then quieter. "Gabriella, are you okay? Are you hurt? Did someone drug you?" "I don't know, I feel fine. I just lost time somehow. 6 hours just vanished." "Where exactly did you stop?" "That rest stop on westbound I-10, mile marker 214. I've stopped there before. It's always been fine." Another pause, then, "Mile marker 214, you sure?" "Positive, why?" "I've had 3 other drivers report weird things about that rest stop. Time confusion, memory gaps. One driver swore he stopped for 10 minutes but his log showed 3 hours. I thought they were all scamming dot hours, trying to hide violations. But if you're reporting the same thing..." Gabriella felt cold despite the Arizona heat. "What is that place?" "I don't know, but don't go back there. And when you can, go to a hospital, get checked out. Make sure someone didn't dose you with something." Gabriella continued to Phoenix, delivered her now-late load, and drove straight to an emergency room. They ran every test imaginable: toxicology, neurology, cognitive assessments. Everything came back normal. No drugs in her system. No signs of head injury. No medical explanation for 6 hours of missing time. The doctor asked if she'd been under stress, if she had a history of dissociative episodes, if she'd been sleeping enough. Gabriella answered no to everything. She was a professional driver with 12 years of clean record. She didn't have blackouts or mental health issues. She just lost time at that rest stop. Over the next week, Gabriella couldn't stop thinking about it. She researched the rest stop online, looking for reports of similar incidents. She found a few vague mentions on trucker forums. Drivers complaining about weird vibes at that location, feeling disoriented after stopping there, having unexplained time discrepancies. One post stood out from a driver named Michael Torres. "Stopped at mile 214 rest stop for bathroom break. Went in at noon, came out and it was dark. My wife had filed a missing persons report. Thought I'd had a stroke or something, but doctors found nothing wrong. The rest stop took my time. It literally stole hours from my life. Don't stop there, ever." Gabriella responded to the post. "Same thing happened to me. 6 hours gone. Do you know what's causing it?" Michael replied within an hour, "No idea, but I talked to an old-timer who's been driving for 40 years. He said that rest stop has been there since the 1960s, and drivers have been reporting time loss since at least the 1980s. Some people think it's electromagnetic anomaly, something about the geology underneath. Others think it's some kind of government experiment. One driver told me it's a place where time moves differently, where hours pass in minutes and minutes pass in hours depending on when you stop." Has anyone investigated officially? Couple times, state police, even FBI once in the 90s after a driver vanished for 3 days and turned up confused at the rest stop with no memory. They found nothing unusual. Building is normal. Ground is normal, nothing in the air or water, but the time loss keeps happening. Gabriella wanted to drop it, to just add the rest stop to her mental list of places to avoid. But something nagged at her. She'd been stopping at that location for years without incident. Why had it affected her this time? What had changed? She drove the route again 2 weeks later, this time deliberately avoiding the rest stop at mile marker 214. As she passed it at 2:30 p.m., she glanced at the parking lot. The lot was full, completely full, at least 30 vehicles parked in neat rows. She could see people walking around, families, truckers, tourists, all normal. But something made Gabriella pull over a mile down the road. She used her binoculars to look back at the rest stop. The people weren't moving. Or rather, they were moving, but slowly, incredibly slowly, like watching video at 1/10 speed. A child who had been running appeared frozen mid-stride, taking minutes to advance a single step. A man walking to his car moved like he was wading through molasses. Gabriella watched for 10 minutes. In that time, the child completed maybe 3 steps. The man reached his car door but hadn't opened it yet. Time inside the rest stop was moving differently, much, much slower than time outside. Which meant Gabriella's stomach dropped as she did the math. If time was moving at 1/10 speed inside the rest stop, then her subjective 5 minutes would have been 50 minutes outside. But she'd lost 6 hours, 360 minutes, which meant time inside was moving at roughly 1/60th normal speed. Every minute inside equaled an hour outside. Gabriella grabbed her phone and called Michael Torres. "I figured it out. The rest stop slows down time. Minutes inside become hours outside." "That's impossible. I'm watching it right now. The people inside are barely moving. It's like they're in slow motion while the rest of the world moves normal speed." Jesus, so when I lost 18 hours, I'd only experienced 18 minutes. Exactly, the rest stop is a time trap. You go in thinking you'll be quick, but the world outside ages while you're frozen in there. How is that possible? That's not physics, that's not anything. I don't know, but we need to warn people, put up signs or something. This is dangerous. Gabriella tried. She called the Department of Transportation, filed reports, contacted local news, talked to anyone who would listen. But how do you prove time is moving differently inside a rest stop? How do you make people believe something so fundamentally impossible? Most people ignored her. Some thought she was mentally ill. A few drivers thanked her for the warning and added the rest stop to their avoid list. But most kept stopping there, kept losing time, kept emerging confused and disoriented with hours missing from their lives. Gabriella stopped driving past that rest stop entirely. She rerouted to avoid it, even though it added an hour to her trip. The extra time was worth it to avoid the time trap. But 6 months later, she heard about another rest stop. This one in New Mexico, mile marker 167 on I-40. Drivers reporting the same thing, stop for minutes, lose hours. Time moving at different speeds inside and outside. Then another report from Texas, another from California, another from Montana. The time traps were spreading. Or maybe they'd always been there, scattered across the country, and people were only now realizing what was happening. How many rest stops stole time? How many drivers had lost hours or days of their lives without understanding why? Gabriella started mapping them, created a spreadsheet of locations, time discrepancies, driver reports. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Every major highway had at least one time trap rest stop. Some had multiple. And the effects seemed to be getting stronger. Earlier reports showed people losing minutes or hours, but recent reports described drivers emerging days later, their families frantic, their jobs lost, their lives disrupted. One driver in Oregon lost a week, went into the rest stop on Monday morning, came out the following Monday night. For him, 15 minutes had passed. For the world, 7 days. Another driver vanished for a month. When she finally emerged from a rest stop in Idaho, confused and disoriented, her family had held a funeral. She'd been declared dead, and she couldn't understand why everyone kept saying she'd been gone for 30 days when she'd only stopped to use the bathroom. The worst case Gabriella heard about was a driver who stopped at a rest stop in Nevada and never came out. Not because he died. Rescue crews went in and found him sitting on a bench, moving so slowly he appeared to be a statue. They tried to pull him out, but the moment they crossed the boundary between normal time and the rest stop's time, they got trapped too. Eventually, they had to abandon the rescue. The driver is still there as far as Gabriella knows, sitting on that bench, experiencing what to him are probably minutes or hours while years pass outside. Eventually, he'll starve. Eventually, he'll die, but it might take decades from an external perspective. Gabriella stopped driving trucks. She couldn't handle the paranoia, the constant fear that any rest stop might be a trap, that stopping for coffee or a bathroom break might cost her days or weeks of her life. She took an office job, stayed in one place, made sure her time was her own. But sometimes she drives. Just local trips, errands, nothing professional, and she's careful about where she stops. She checks her watch constantly, compares it to her phone, makes sure time is passing normally. Because the time traps are still out there, still stealing hours and days and weeks from unsuspecting travelers, still freezing people in slow-motion existence while the world moves on without them. And no one's figured out how to stop them, how to fix them, how to even prove they're real. So Gabriella just warns people, posts online, tells other drivers, shares her spreadsheet of suspect locations. It's not much, but it's something. And she never, ever stops at mile marker 214 on I-10. Even though sometimes, when she drives past, she sees herself in that parking lot. A version of Gabriella who stopped that day and never quite left, who's still experiencing those 5 subjective minutes while years pass outside, who will eventually emerge into a world that's moved on without her. Time is strange on the highways, and some places it's stranger than others. Asterisk Story 10. The delivery that delivers itself. Anthony Russo had hauled all kinds of cargo in his 18 years of driving: furniture, electronics, food, livestock, hazardous materials, even human remains once. But he'd never hauled a delivery that seemed to know where it was going better than he did. The trouble started when his GPS rerouted him without explanation. Anthony was driving from Nashville to Atlanta, a route he'd driven hundreds of times. He knew every exit, every truck stop, every speed trap. But somewhere south of Chattanooga, his GPS suddenly recalculated, directing him onto a county road he'd never taken before. Route deviation, the GPS announced. New destination coordinates received. Received from where? Anthony asked the device, which obviously didn't answer. He tried to cancel the reroute, but the GPS ignored his inputs. The screen showed a new destination, not the Atlanta warehouse where he was supposed to deliver, but some unmarked location about 40 miles off his planned route. And his truck was already taking the exit, following the GPS directions despite Anthony's attempts to steer back to the highway. What the hell? Anthony jerked the wheel hard left, trying to override whatever was happening. The truck didn't respond. The wheel turned uselessly in his hands while the truck continued following the GPS directions, as if it had a mind of its own. Anthony tried the brakes. The pedal went to the floor with no effect. He tried putting the transmission in neutral. The shifter wouldn't move. Every control in the cab had become non-functional except the throttle, which maintained a steady 55 miles per hour. His truck was driving itself. Anthony grabbed his phone to call for help, but before he could dial, the screen changed. Instead of his normal display, it showed a message. Delivery in progress. Do not interfere. Cargo must reach destination. I'm the driver, Anthony shouted at the phone. I decide where the cargo goes. Another message appeared. Negative. Cargo determines destination. Driver is transport mechanism only. Thank you for your service. The phone shut off. When Anthony tried to restart it, it remained dead. He was trapped in a truck driving itself toward an unknown destination, with no way to communicate and no control over the vehicle. Anthony's professional training said stay calm, assess the situation, look for solutions. But his instincts were screaming danger. He looked at his cargo documentation. According to the paperwork, he was hauling medical supplies. Nothing unusual, nothing that should be causing his truck to develop autonomous driving capabilities. But when Anthony checked the seal on his trailer, he noticed something odd. The seal was glowing, just faintly, barely visible in daylight, but definitely emitting a soft blue light. And the metal felt warm to the touch, like something inside the trailer was generating heat. Anthony climbed onto the truck's steps to look through the trailer's small side vent. What he saw made no sense. The cargo, which should have been pallets of boxed medical supplies, was moving. Individual boxes were rearranging themselves, stacking and unstacking, forming patterns that looked almost organic, and they were all glowing with that same blue light. "What the hell am I hauling?" Anthony muttered. His radio, which he'd forgotten about, suddenly activated. A voice spoke, calm and clinical. "Driver Anthony Russ, you are transporting specialized cargo designated as Unit 777. This cargo is semi-autonomous and capable of determining its own optimal delivery location based on real-time data analysis. Your role is to provide transportation infrastructure. Please do not attempt to interfere with the delivery process." "Who is this? What kind of cargo is this?" "Classification is restricted. You were selected for this delivery based on your safety record and psychological profile. You will be compensated for the deviation from your scheduled route." "I don't want compensation. I want control of my truck back." "That is not possible. Unit 777 has assumed operational control to ensure delivery success. Please remain calm. Estimated arrival at destination, 42 minutes. The radio went silent. Anthony tried multiple channels but received only static. He was being hijacked, not by a person but by his own cargo. Whatever was in that trailer had taken over his truck systems and was driving itself to whatever destination it had chosen. Anthony tried to think of solutions. He couldn't jump from the truck at 55 miles per hour. He couldn't call for help. He couldn't regain control of the vehicle. His only option was to wait and see where the cargo wanted to go. The county road became progressively more rural. Small towns gave way to farmland, which gave way to forest. Traffic disappeared entirely. Anthony was alone on a narrow two-lane road winding through wilderness, heading toward... what? The radio activated again. "Driver Russo, you are experiencing understandable anxiety. Please be assured that Unit 777 has no hostile intentions toward you. This delivery is simply necessary for research purposes." "Research into what?" "Autonomous cargo systems. Unit 777 is a prototype. A shipping container capable of determining its own delivery location based on environmental factors, supply chain optimization algorithms, and predictive demand modeling. You are participating in the first real-world test of this technology." "I didn't agree to be a test subject." "Your agreement was implicit in accepting the shipping contract. Section 14, paragraph 7. Driver acknowledges that certain cargo may require specialized handling and routing at the discretion of the shipper. This is specialized routing, Driver Russo. You are handling it admirably." "What happens when we reach the destination?" "The cargo will be unloaded. You will be released. Your truck systems will return to manual control. You will be compensated 3 times your standard delivery rate." "And if I refuse, if I find a way to stop this?" A long pause. "Then, that would be unfortunate. Unit 777 is programmed to complete delivery by any means necessary. Please do not force escalation of protocols." The implication was clear. If Anthony interfered, the cargo would do something worse than just taking control of his steering. He sat back in the driver's seat, useless now since he wasn't actually driving, and watched the road unspool before him. The forest grew denser, the road narrower. They were heading deep into wilderness, far from any marked destination on Anthony's maps. After 38 minutes, the truck turned onto a dirt road. No sign marked the turn. No gate or barrier suggested this road led anywhere important, just a gap in the trees and a worn dirt track disappearing into shadow. The truck drove or another mile, branches scraping against the trailer until they reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing sat a building that looked like a high-tech warehouse. Gleaming metal walls, no windows, a large loading dock with automated equipment. It was completely incongruous with the rural setting, like someone had dropped a Silicon Valley facility into the middle of Appalachian wilderness. The truck backed up to the loading dock with precision Anthony couldn't have matched on his best day. The trailer aligned perfectly with the dock plate. Then, without any human intervention, the trailer doors unlocked and opened. Anthony climbed out of the cab. He needed to see what was happening, needed to understand what he'd been hauling. The cargo unloaded itself. The boxes of medical supplies floated out of the trailer, actually floated, hovering 3 feet off the ground, moving in coordinated formation toward the warehouse. They were still glowing blue, still rearranging themselves, still doing things that cargo absolutely should not be capable of doing. As the last box floated into the warehouse, a door opened in the building's side. A person emerged, at least, Anthony thought it was a person. They wore a full hazmat suit that obscured any identifying features. "Driver Russo," the figure said, voice muffled by the suit. "Thank you for your cooperation. Unit 777 has reached its destination successfully. Your truck systems will be restored momentarily." "What was I carrying, really?" "Classified, but I can tell you that you've helped advance logistics technology by approximately 5 years. Autonomous cargo routing will revolutionize the shipping industry. Imagine deliveries that optimize themselves in real time, rerouting to wherever demand is highest, eliminating human error in the supply chain." "That's terrifying. You're talking about cargo that controls the vehicles transporting it, cargo that can hijack trucks and drivers." "Only temporarily, only when necessary for optimal delivery." "And what if the cargo decides somewhere dangerous is the optimal location? What if it roots itself into a school or a government building? You've created shipping that can weaponize itself." The figure paused. "Those concerns have been noted, but efficiency outweighs risk. It always has in logistics." A beeping sound came from Anthony's truck. The dashboard lights flickered, then returned to normal patterns. The engine, which had been running at the same steady RPM for nearly an hour, varied its tone naturally. Control had been returned. "Your compensation has been deposited," the figure said. "Please exit the facility grounds. This location does not exist on any map and should not be visited again. Your GPS will guide you back to the main highway." Anthony climbed into his truck and drove away, his hands shaking on the wheel that was finally responding to his input again. The GPS did indeed guide him back to the county road, then to I-75, then toward Atlanta as if nothing unusual had happened. He checked his bank account at the next truck stop. 3 times his standard rate had been deposited, exactly as promised. "Hey,